All right, welcome everybody to the Independent Transportation Surtax Oversight Board meeting, May 23rd, 2019. Since we have our name tags, we know who's here, so we don't need to take roll call today, or we don't need to introduce ourselves. Or do we want to? I think we're good. Let's keep going. All righty. So how are we doing? Are we going, so we're starting with presentations? Okay. All right, so the first item on the agenda is a presentation from the MPO. I'm going to try to pronounce your name. Erica Lychak.
Very good, yes.
Okay, is here to present.
Most don't normally get it on the first go, so thank you. Yes.
Let me just remind everybody, we have to speak into the mic. You got to hit the green button because the minutes were almost impossible to because at the beginning of the meeting we didn't do that.
Alan, one thing, we also need to turn them off because what's happening, and if mine's on and I'm not speaking and the person next to me says something, it picks up as inaudible and makes the minutes a lot longer. So you got to turn it on, you got to turn it off.
Will do. So good morning. My name is Erica Lychak. I'm the Communications Manager with the Broward MPO, also the Title VI Coordinator. And here today, or this morning, to chat with you about an effort that the Broward MPO has undertaken for, I'd say, probably close to the last 2 years. And it's an effort that we've entitled our Transportation Planning Equity Assessment. So specifically looking at equity, looking at not just our Title VI and environmental justice federal requirements as checking a box, but sort of a way in which we've tried to develop a resource, develop a bit of a methodology that just about anyone can take this data set and use it in any of their plans and programs. So what I'm going to do is take you through just some of the history and a little bit of the context around this, explain a little bit of the process by which we got to the sort of the assessment or the resource that we have, and then kind of show you in real time what it looks like and a little bit of what it can do. So in terms of Title VI and environmental justice, some of the things that we know, well, the first thing is that Title VI is that no person in the United States shall, on the basis of race, color, national origin, sex, age, disability, handicap, or income status, be excluded from participation in, be denied the benefits of, or otherwise subjected to discrimination under any federal or non-federal funded program or activity. So that's kind of the umbrella under which this operates. I just like to say it because I know some of us know it and some of us don't. So really, any agency that receives any kind of federal funds has to adhere to those Title VI requirements and any of the other federal non-discrimination authorities. Now, at the Broward MPO specifically, we've always used equity. We've always kind of tried to evaluate it and tried to look at how we can use it in our plans and programs, but it's been in various forms. So the idea was, well, let's create something that's a little bit more standardized that can be used used in association with various plans and programs. And again, how can we do more? So traditionally, when we talk about evaluating equity, outreach is one of the areas. Now that I just bring that as an example from, personally kind of what I do with the MPO every day. But one of the things that often is used throughout a lot of other agencies or those who plan transportation is what we would call a gap analysis approach. So this is an example here. This is an annual outreach map that we prepare, basically just mapping against the county where we've been and then the nature of whatever that meeting or interaction or outreach event was. But the question is, well, how do you evaluate that? What creates, kind of meaningful outcomes? And we wanted to kind of find a way to be able to better quantify this. So coming back to the question, well, how can you do more? How can you take that kind of an extra step? So what we did with the MPO is created a working group where, again, we wanted to develop a standardized process that could be used across plans and programs. Now, when I'm talking about this in terms of, or the context of the Broward MPO, this is something that extends well beyond those boundaries. So I do want to sort of emphasize the fact that this is something that you know, anyone who's looking at doing any kind of planning, transportation, et cetera, this tool is definitely something that would be useful to you. And then, of course, to build an assessment that would be a resource in the evaluation process. Oops, pardon me. So some of the objectives of this assessment was that we wanted something that would consistently evaluate plans and programs against those federal and state non-discrimination authorities, something that would improve efficiency in planning and programming. So again, that's where the goal takes us and the objective takes us far beyond sort of the walls of the Broward MPO. Something that would more effectively satisfy the Title VI and environmental justice requirements. Again, you know, there's the idea of, you know, checking the box and saying, yes, it's been done, but then how do you actually more effectively and more meaningfully really look at equity and what that means to us? Producing meaningful outcomes. Again, we wanted to be producing something meaningful for the community through transportation plans and programs, particularly looking at those in our Title VI and environmental justice populations. One of the key things I think that differentiates this resource is that we want to be identifying adverse impacts early. So a lot of times you'll take something through a plan, you know, you'll have it ready to go, and then we say, all right, well, let's look at equity, and what does that look like? Are we, you know, have we addressed the communities that we need to be looking at? So this really takes that process and says, well, let's move it from the end and let's bring it kind of back to the very, very beginning. And of course, I mean, this might be obvious, but the idea that we're advancing equity in Broward. So in terms of what this kind of assessment, the objectives, I'll just go through this quickly, is that we wanted to be using available and accessible data, because again, it's great to have something, but if it only is relevant for the next 6 months and operates in a vacuum, it's not going to be of much use really to anyone, to any of us. It needs to be simple, it needs to be something that's flexible, because again, we want our local partners, we want our county partners, everyone to really be able to use this in a meaningful way. Another big goal or objective is that it needs to be objective, because when we start talking about equity and we're talking about, you know, addressing the needs of our region, subjectivity creeps into this process. Whether we intend to or not, a lot of times the person looking at the data, it's open to subjectivity. So we wanted to take that away and actually make this a data-driven exercise. And then the last is that it's open sourced. So the data that this is drawing from is the American Community Survey, which is something that is updated on a very frequent basis. So it keeps this information fresh, it keeps it current, and it keeps it relevant. So we're going to get to what the actual output looks like in just a second, but I did want to let you know kind of what the components are of this, so that when I show you the map, you kind of have an idea of what it all sort of entails. So it calculates what we would call a composite or equity score. So it's a 5-step calculation process. I won't sort of take you through all of the very back-end technical part of it, because, you know, it's important, but for the purposes of today, it's more about looking like, well, what does the data actually look like to the user? And again, we use that ACS, American Community Survey data, and we used a set of demographic indicators. So indicators are things, and you can turn them on or off. So it's going to produce a map, and it's going to produce a fairly customizable results depending on the indicators that you are wanting to focus on. So I'm going to flip to the next slide, but then, excuse me, I'm going to go back for just a second. So what we decided would be what we're calling the core indicators, or the default for this tool, is there's 7, and you'll see them there. We had race and minority, low income, disability, minority, and national origin, as well as age. Now, the reason why we went with these 7 is because these are the ones that are directly linked to the federal requirements. Now, there is what we call a secondary set of indicators. So you can start looking at things like female-led household, for example, or zero vehicle household. I know that comes into play a lot when you're talking about planning for transit. But it's this idea that you can really, again, as I said, customize that result so that what you see is really giving you a good idea of what's going on in Broward, and not just maybe in Broward. You can start looking, you know, as micro as a community to see what those factors are and what that really looks like in certain areas. And then the last thing I wanted to add is that it's statistically driven calculations. So again, there's no user assigned scoring. There's nothing at the end where it says, okay, well, based on what you've seen, assign a number. This is very much about, again, the data is going to provide you with that output. And again, taking out that subjectivity. So this is a static image of what the output actually looks like. So it comes out as a map. And I know a map in and of itself is probably not revolutionary. However, what this does is it actually color codes, and this looks familiar, it's Broward County, and it takes an equity score, I should say, to block groups. And the color-coded kind of legend has low to very high. The one thing that I do want to make clear is that low isn't good and very high isn't bad. It's not a matter of yes or no, good or bad. It's simply a matter of these are the areas in which you're going to see a high concentration of those core indicators that we were looking at. Is this going to be the magic fix-all that's going to, be the number one driver in any plan and program that you have? No. What it is going to do is it's intended to be a guide. And it's never going to replace what we call that gut check, the community input, the meeting with the residents of those different areas. And really it's intended to provide informed conversations and really additionally informed decision making. One thing I would sort of like to mention is that we did bring this equity assessment and this presentation to the TRB, which is the Transportation Research Board in Washington. So they're a national, premier transportation planning organization. We've also been in very close contact with both FHWA, which is the Federal Highway Administration, and FTA, the Federal Transit Administration. They've seen this and are very, very excited about this, what it can do, and just really the wide reach of this resource. So I am going to switch in a second, and I took a static image of this just because, Wi-Fi, we weren't sure if it was going to work or not. But that static map that I showed you is kind of step one. And step two here is really what we're calling the interactive map. So if I do this properly. So this is housed on the Broward MPO website. And this is what we call the interactive map. So when you we come in and scroll over this and you click it, now I'm hoping you can see that, and if not, you can definitely have a look on your own time. So here, this is saying we've got an area that's very high. Well, this actually gives you the breakdown. Why is that area considered very high and one that we want to pay special attention to when we're looking at things from, a Title VI equity lens? Well, we see that, and it breaks it down based on those 7 factors. Now, again, if you were to take this and rerun the data using those secondary indicators that we spoke about, it would still give you the breakdown. It wouldn't skew the results, I should say. It's still going to break it down for you based on the percentage of people that you find with those specific indicators. So here, the big driver is that we have a racial minority. But again, it's giving you youth, persons with a disability, older adults, those with limited English proficiency, etc. Now, the other thing that we've done here is that we've actually, what I like to say is we've peeled back the layers of the onion, because again, when we look at that static map, it's giving you everything. It's taking all of those indicators and it's providing you with an output based on all of those. What this does here is this then breaks those out piece by piece. So you actually have 7 different maps that you can look at, and again, with those secondary indicators, they're all still available as additional resource. However, so we look at racial minority, and then let's see, youth, those in the age 10 to 17. Something here which is, and again, all of this information is very valuable, but it depends on what you're using it for. But that's where there is an extreme amount of versatility for this, and it isn't just about, planning roadways or those sorts of things. We're going to be using this, like from the Broward MPO standpoint, even when we shape our community outreach and our community engagement, because I know that the messaging that I'm going to bring to a community that is very youth-centric, as opposed to those with an aging population, your message is going to be different. And this really comes to sort of inform a lot of those different elements. All right. So I put this in this little bubble here, and so we've identified equity areas. Well, now what? That's great. We have a map, and we can look at it, and we see these pretty blocks, but what does that actually mean? So what we have done, which is I think the next step, and it's why this process is set a little bit apart from those that might exist, for other agencies or other transportation planning bodies, is that we're actually now implementing this in projects and implementing this in our transportation planning process. So we've got 3 levels here. So we've got project concept, development, and then investment. So to take you through the project concept level, this is where we're currently using this for our long-range plan or our Metropolitan Transportation Plan, large scale. We're talking, looking at the general benefits to equity areas. It's going to be driven by data, and again, it's standardized for subsequent updates because, we make long-range plans. We're always looking forwards into the future, but you're always having to revisit those plans. It doesn't stay exactly as it was in its first iteration if you're talking about, planning 30 years into the future. The other thing that I think is really to note is that equity has become a prominent factor in the project evaluation process. I've highlighted it for the purposes of this presentation, but these are some of the other factors that we look at, but equity has become one of them, which is definitely a change, I would say, for the better as we plan our transportation. So the second one is the project development level. Excuse me. So this is where you zoom in a little bit. So rather than looking at, an entire transportation planning system, you're starting to look at sub-area or maybe corridor studies. So this is where you're going to be using a little bit more of the localized input. And it really is just going to provide you what we think is some equity assessment guidelines for different types of plans. So the output for something like this, or the utilization of the data at this level would be really guidelines for not only the MPO, but for consultants, for local partners, for everyone to follow as they're doing those sub-area or corridor studies. And one publication that we've created at the MPO that I think really dovetails into this nicely is that there's a transportation planning guidebook, which actually takes you through what makes a project what we call shovel ready. It's checklists. It's looking at how do you get to the point of being able to bring a project forwards to actually be ready to sign the check, so to speak. Now again, that's where this equity assessment is really, we think, going to come into play. The last, and what I would say has been maybe one of the not more challenging, but one of the ones we've really had to kind of wrap our heads around a little bit, is project investment. Because project investment is when you're at the end of the process. You've invested the money, you've put the project in, so we see we've got some little dollar signs here. So what have we done with equity? And as I said, traditionally this is the time that you look at it and say, distribution of investment mapped on top of Broward County, let's see how they match up. So what we're saying is that instead of that, you're going to be obviously dealing with equity at the beginning of the process, but you're going to start looking more at trends. You're going to start looking at investments over time because, these plans, again, as I said, get updated very often, but these are some of the questions that you're asking from an equity standpoint, having used that data. How are we doing? What are the trends? Do adjustments need to be made? So as I said, as we make that circle through the planning process and we start to, we would call it a feedback loop. This comes to inform that feedback loop of, are we matching the needs of our community? So that was all that I had. I did include a fact sheet here, which I can leave extras, if there's anyone from the public that would like them as well. They're also available on our website, but that will probably address anything that, I wasn't able to in the last few minutes. But if anyone has any questions or anything else, I can certainly do that, or we can move on
Any
to the
board
next.
members? Do you have a question, George?
Yeah, just one. Thank you for your presentation, Erica. That was very helpful. You mentioned towards the end that you integrate localized public input at the project development level. How do you do that specifically?
At the project development level?
Yeah, it was on slide 14.
Okay.
Where you go to the local community.
Right.
And
So
get input from them.
localized public input, this is where, some of it is simple, where we're talking about you have some potential plans, some proposed plans or projects, and it's about, engaging with the public in different formats. But I think the localized input, what that looks like from a format perspective, again, is going to depend on the community that you're going into. So it may be a traditional public meeting. I would say it's less prescriptive when it comes to that, and it's more about, what are the ways in which, is it about going to a local library and attending an evening event? Is it about, a community association? Is it about setting up a separate public meeting with those constituents? It really, I think, depends on where you're going, but it's about those one-on-one interactive kind of discussions that are really going to start to inform whether you're headed down the right path, so to speak.
Okay, and just one last question then. How do you take that information and analyze it or incorporate it into the next step?
So that would be, I think, the best example I could give you, and what we're working on right now is that long-range plan. So the long-range plan, we've done, a lot of work with our municipalities in terms of meeting and gauging what those communities and municipalities are looking for. But then also there's a large piece that says, all right, we have a draft list of proposed projects that we then set up a very concentrated public outreach effort to go out and get feedback, and specifically get feedback from the public. And it has an impact, and it definitely comes to, I can't say specifically, if what it might do to one project or the other, but I do know that it has an impact, and it's certainly taken into consideration when we look at anything that we're proposing going forwards.
Thank you.
Mr. Allen.
Thank you, Erica. Will the equity assessment be utilized by the MPO in fulfilling their obligations that was recently agreed to on the evaluation of municipal projects for the 5-year plan?
With Broward County?
With the municipalities,
Oh, yes.
ranking those projects, will this?
Yes,
model
equity
be-
is something that is a prominent piece of basically everything that we're doing going forward. So everything that we're doing locally, what we're doing long range, this assessment is something that we're using across the board.
So the cities would then develop a project concept, bring that to the MPO and say, we'd like to fund this with the counties, with the surtax. The assessment then would be applied to that to rank this project in Coral Springs versus this project in Sunrise.
Well, it would be a part of the discussion and a part of the project. I don't want to.
It's on. I'm sorry.
Okay.
Maybe I just need to
Sorry, maybe I'm projecting
come a little bit
louder.
closer.
So yeah, again, the equity assessment, and that's why I stress that this isn't sort of the stamp that is going to say yay or nay to any project, but this is something, it is a resource in that toolkit that we use when going through project prioritization.
But from MPO then, will they predefine what the ranking process is among these projects? I mean, if you've got this project here that is $5 million and will produce X amount of mobility, then you apply the equity assessment to that to see how that fits, or is that just part of the overall development?
Thank you.
Good morning. Greg Stewart with the Broward MPO, and thanks in the back. Phil, great questions. We know what we have to do as far as immediate, which is congestion and connectivity. Equity is something we do on all of our lenses when we use federal funds and state funds. We need to be working with the county and with the member governments to assess where the equity tool would fit into this, because there's balances that you need to be looking at in corridor project delivery and all the other efforts that we're going to be trying to do together. So while Erica is absolutely right, we do it on all our functions. This new function that we're doing together, figuring out how that balances out, we may filter the first year's projects through the lens and figure if this actually does make sense or not. So that way then we can report together with the county on how these projects would be impacted by the equity tool.
Thank you.
Ms. Pennant?
Good morning. Thank you for your presentation. I was just curious to know how what you're doing factors in that 30% requirement with respect to how we're spending the dollars.
I'll defer to.
We'll be back to you with that one too. We have to, together with Gretchen, myself, and Angela, we're going to be working together with the governments to say, okay, well, this is your 30%. How does that factor in? Is this, you know, the equitable distribution on that side as well? It's going to be challenging.
Yes, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to clarify. I think your question, Ms. Pennant, is actually related to the local preference goals. Yes, so I just wanted to make sure that the MPO understood what the nature of the question was.
Okay, so that's actually the purchasing side of things, and that's going to be outside of the realm that we've been tasked with.
Thank you.
Any other questions from board members? I took my notes, so I have a few things. So define environmental stewardship or environmental justice. Define that for me.
So that we actually take right from the statute. So the environmental justice is identifying and ensuring that there's no adverse impact to anyone, basically anyone in the United States. So while we have Title VI, which is a non-discrimination, environmental justice is actually saying that the impacts of anything that is implemented doesn't have adverse impact on those specific populations.
So it's really not about the environment, it's more about the environment in which we live.
Social impact.
I
yeah.
gotcha.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, we use environment, but it's kind of a holistic term to umbrella all of that.
And then another thing, you know, I was a chair of a community bus organization in downtown Fort Lauderdale. I think Greg is now the chair. He took my place. He's a good chair too. And so what we found was, just to reinforce what you're doing, what we found was that our Northwest, which is a lower income neighborhood compared to the other neighborhoods that we were serving, the ridership was through the roof. And there's a direct correlation between ridership and equity, I would imagine. And so this is definitely a good tool to implement. But I think also when we're looking at income, then we're looking at our objective, which is to reduce traffic. And I think Greg just kind of touched on that, is that the working individuals that maybe aren't below poverty, but that are in cars, that are creating traffic, if they had a choice that not only benefited the lower income group of our society, but also gave them an option to get out of their car. So, you know, I think we can never lose sight of that. I think we can never lose sight of the idea that there is transportation that is, we raise the bar on the type of level of service that we give. And not only does it benefit the lower income groups and all the groups that are within your equity analysis, but also it starts to get people out of their cars that would not otherwise, and have a choice to stay in their car, but they would otherwise choose to come and use our transportation. So that's why I thought where you were touching was there's an analysis between the two. And I think that's important because it could be a win-win for it drives, when you start benefiting groups that are at different levels, I think it uplifts a lot of people, and it has interaction that has positive impact on our society and and on all people. So I think that we have to keep our eye on the fact that we have to get some people out of the car that are just working individuals, that are driving into downtown, that are going to the beach to work, that are going to Sawgrass or out of the county. And so it's a mix, I think. Thank you.
No problem. One thing I do want to just add to this, and I think it's something interesting that we always have to be thinking about, is that Broward County is now a majority county. So again, when we look at what we were doing sort of traditionally in the past, the correlation between, your ethnicity and your income, or those sorts of, I guess, conclusions that were being drawn in the past, doesn't always apply in Broward. So that's why we need to tweak our approach a little bit and tweak the way that we're looking at equity, because again, it no longer kind of fits into that neat little box. We've got some anomalies now that say, okay, we have to think about this in a different way.
Not only that, if you look at streets like, we've talked about this in the past, 441, Broward Boulevard, these spine streets that University Drive, I think as a developer, you're going to see development occurring that is directed at the same individuals that the equity analysis is pointing to. And so neighborhoods are going to grow around neighborhoods that you would not have otherwise been able to click on your computer to say, this is where there's inequity. It's actually going to start, it could move, or there could be other areas. And some of that will be driven, if we solely point to the areas of hardship, then the 441s of the world and there is hardship on the outskirts, I know that. But just new development that could benefit the folks that you're pointing out, it kind of, that's another reason why I think we have to have a matrix of a way to look at this so that we can, again, uplift people. But I think 441, Broward, there's places where we're going to have new neighborhoods pop up in different forms. In the environment, not the way you're talking about it, but resiliency and things like that are also going to change where neighborhoods might have to move to, or they might have to develop in a different way.
I'd just like to know, what is the overall goal, the long-term goal of doing equity analysis? How do you determine impact and measure results?
So that is what we are presently working on and working through. So this, taking this equity assessment, so first of all, we kind of had to build it, and we had to design the methodology and design that 5-step calculation process. Now we're actually taking it through our long-range plan, our MTP. So this first kind of transportation planning loop that we're kind of beginning is where I think we're going to see it work through. We're going to, kind of take it through its paces, and then that feedback loop begins to inform our future decision making. And I think on a high level, that's really the goal, is to make sure that this equity piece that is so critical, that is so crucial, is being looked at and examined through every stage and element of the transportation planning process. But then at the end of it, or what would then be the beginning of the next cycle, we look at it and say, all right, what have we done? What have we sort of addressed? What have we not addressed? And how do we make sure that we're continually improving that process and making it a more comprehensive assessment?
Yes, Ms. Kelly.
Okay, is this working? I just wondered, thank you very much for the presentation. I went to a wonderful conference yesterday called the Aging Network conference for Broward, and I just wondered, I understand that equity is a factor among the others that you consider for project prioritization, right? But in terms of the data that you're using, the census, which there have been problems with the census, and the ACS, I guess, is the other source of information. Do you have, I can see how certain of these populations, the youth versus the aged and disabled, might not, I guess I'm asking, what is your comfort level with the amount of data that you have for each of these populations? Is it different for certain populations in terms of response? And is it constantly being added to, or, you know, in terms of your data?
Well, that was actually the reason why we went with the census and the ACS, American Community Survey, is because, first of all, it's information that we know we're getting from the expert, sort of, so to speak. You know, it's not an independent data collection. It's coming to us, you know, from a higher level. But the idea is that, you know, the ACS is updated, I believe, every 18 months to 2 years. So we know that at any point in time, the data that we're using is quite recent and is quite fresh. So it allows us to say that, you know, and again, one example I can give you is that when we first ran this, kind of the first output in 2016, well, that map already looks different when we ran it again for 2017.
Right.
We had a community in Weston, and we thought, well, what is this? Why is it lighting up? Well, it turned out that we had a large population of youth. Well, we had a large population of youth that then, I guess, graduated and passed that 17 age point threshold, and then the demographics and the makeup of the community becomes different again, and it changes.
Yeah.
And so when you're talking about, you know, the you know, maybe the transportation disadvantaged or the disabled versus the aging population, that's where we think that the tool has the ability to look at it all together, but then it also has the ability to look at it individually. And that's, I think, the differentiating factor there. So we try to keep the data, you know, as fresh as we can in this transportation planning process.
Great.
Anybody else? Okay, thank you very much. That was very informative. Okay, thanks, Greg. Thank you, Ms. Lychak. Okay, Mobility Advanced Plan Innovation Integration Smart County Plan. Lenny Vialpando. Good morning.
So thanks for having me back. I started to talk about this, I think, a little bit at the last day. And, you know, basically the idea is, and you'll see a lot of this IoT or Internet of Things, and this idea that we can use data to make better decisions. And it's partly based on this idea that, you know, when, you know, physicality has awareness, right? So like when you're in the forest or something like that, you know, the birds and the wildlife, and they're interacting, they're adapting, responding to you. And many times in the gray environment, you know, it's frustrating because it doesn't respond or adapt. And you find yourself waiting at a red light that is red for no reason because nobody's coming the other way, but it's just time for it to turn red, and so it does. And so there's this idea that we can use Internet of Things to basically connect the gray environment and make it more like the natural environment, right? So we can make it mimic the natural environment through the use of sensors that can detect pedestrians, they can communicate vehicle to vehicle, traffic signals that are adaptive. Maybe they recognize that it's an ambulance and let it through, or that it's a bus and make the calculation that we should probably let it by. Use cameras to detect near misses between pedestrians and vehicles, and this idea that maybe that's an intersection that could use some improvement, or detect pedestrians and say, well, you know, maybe we need some more crosswalks in this area, or change the timing because somebody's having a harder time getting across the street. And so basically what I have for you is just a kind of some examples of how that works and what that looks like, as well as some examples of data visualization and the ways that we want to A, collect and use data to make better decisions, and then B, better convey that data to the public and not just show them, you know, a static map and say, you know, well, this is information, but help them sort of like interact with that information and use it in a way that hopefully they can enhance their lives, and, you know, we can delight them with their ability to get around the county, hopefully. So this quick video here basically just gives you an overview of what a smart city might look like.
occurs throughout the city in real time. Potholes and subsurface damage create noise signatures that can be used to inform maintenance plans, detect footsteps and crowd movement, be alert to pedestrians in secure or critical areas, monitor mass transit systems with accurate speed and location to better inform public transport. High-speed, real-time analytics pulls all of this information together to inform traffic information systems, highlight efficient routes, and redirect traffic around roadworks.
Diagram-looking thing off to the
This is
side
actually
here,
Google
and
the
see if you
information
might
that they
recognize
have
some
based on
patterns in
people's
it.
use of
Does anyone have
apps.
any ideas of what we might be looking at? Yep, some urban areas, some parking. They're definitely urban areas, you're right. In fact, if we show the names here, we're looking at some familiar areas. You got the Bay Area off to the side, New York, London, Tokyo, San Francisco. So what we're looking at here is movements of people on their mobile devices. Every one of these dots is somebody that has opted in Google Maps on their phone for location tracking. So you've taken that data, anonymized it, collected it, and you're looking at the living, breathing city here. This is a 24-hour cycle of where people are going, what they're up to, and this is enormously valuable data. It gives us a bit of a sense of context for what we're talking about today, that there's an incredible amount of information that's available to us if we can make use of it. So this is for people's personal uses on their phones and maps and seeing where they've been. But imagine how useful data like this could be to people who are planning traffic patterns, people who are trying to plan pickup routes for waste management, somebody who's trying to get a new freeway going, somebody who's trying to choose where the next neighborhood that businesses should grow in. We're seeing a growth in mobile devices, we're seeing a growth in IoT devices, and we're seeing a simultaneous growth in the ability to process this data on a massive scale. So this is just the beginning of smart cities.
So that's an example of the types of information that you can get from people's use of apps. And again, it's anonymized. It's just this idea that you can tell where people are going, when they're going, maybe, how long it takes them to get there, origin and destination, so we can try to determine the best way to provide service to them. And we can get that from, again, companies like Google, as well as from cell phone information, many different apps. The weather apps are actually one of the biggest sources of that type of information, as well as from other companies. This is an example of a company called Streetlight Data. And what this you are going to see in a moment here is a series of blue dots that indicate rideshare usage. So these are rideshare drivers, Uber and Lyft drivers, that have the Uber and Lyft app open, and how they move around the Tri-County area in a 24-hour period. And you can use that information to try to figure out, for example, in San Francisco, they determined that rideshare could be the root cause of about 50% of the increase in travel time and 50% of the decrease in average vehicle speed. For example, in Broward County, before Uber and Lyft came, which I was regulating taxis and such at the time, and we had 900 taxis. And then the next day, Uber showed up, and there were 20,000 rideshare vehicles in Broward County roaming our streets. And this just kind of gives you an example of how they move around the county. If you look there in the lower left, this is the time. So that's like 8 a.m. And right around in here is the Fort Lauderdale Airport. And then, of course, there's a lot of them in Miami. But what's interesting to note is it doesn't really change all day long, right? It's like, noon, 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, 3. So it's not your imagination that sometimes there's really no such thing as rush hour. It's like just always full of people. And so, you can even see them, which surprised me, going across Alligator Alley and, a little bit lesser so up north. But this is just the example of a way that we can use the information to figure out how people are using our roadways, where they're coming from, where they're turning, where they're going to, and hopefully be able to effectively route them and plan for these changes, because, Uber and Lyft happened to us. And, I think the goal would be that we're proactive enough and collect enough information and get ahead of it enough that the next time it doesn't happen to us. Because if we don't do this kind of thing, it will. And we don't know what the next evolution is. But a lot of people say that if you don't keep up and you don't do smart cities, you may become the digital Rust Belt. And this idea that, it's just not an easy place to live, not a good place to get around. And so it's up to us to sort of use this data to hopefully, make that change. And this is another example of how you can do that. So this is the same kind of data that the blue dots were, except for this is just people on their morning commute in Austin. So I-35 is the main thoroughfare. It's very, very busy. It's bumper to bumper on most days. And they were looking at ways they could get people moving around a little better. So the first thing they did is they said, okay, what are our top origin zip codes in the morning during peak hours on an average weekday, right? So if it's red, that means a lot of people are coming from there. If it's green, that means not that many. And then, orange and yellow are in between. And so you see in the morning, a lot of people are coming from way south here and from way north there. And then this shows you where they're headed to. So the same applies. They're all headed to downtown Austin because it's red. And they're not really headed here. They're actually leaving from here, right? So the idea is everybody needs to get north and south on these roadways. So they looked at this particular intersection and they said, okay, we think we need to do a bypass here. Let's put a bridge over or a tunnel under. Let's make it so that everybody can get on the interstate and get going north and south because that's where they want to go. And before they did that, though, they said, hey, wait, let's take a look at this data of how people are actually using this intersection and whether or not that would be the best decision. So when they did that, they found that, you know what? They were kind of right. A third of everyone that used this intersection did want to go north. But the majority of people, 39%, really wanted to go left. And so if they had done the bypass and people couldn't go left here, it could have just created another problem downstream or upstream of this. So it's really helpful to try to figure out how people are actually using the location and then forming your decision about the changes you make around that. So it's really exciting that we can start to use this information to actually see how people want to use transit, how they are using it, and then how we can figure out better ways to make improvements. And part of that is also giving them access to better information, right? So we're going to collect the info, but we don't want to just hoard it. We want to give it to people, let them use it to make their day better. So this is an example of Fort Lauderdale. And, I commute every day to downtown Fort Lauderdale, and, a lot of times it's difficult. Roads are closed. And, yeah, sure enough, I checked this one day. There are 53 roads closed at the same time, which seems like a lot. I was actually very surprised that there were 53 roads closed in Fort Lauderdale at the same time. But, you can't find this information for the entire county, right? You sort of, maybe you can go to Fort Lauderdale, maybe another city has it, and we're like, well, it would be really nice if we could provide one centralized location where people could find this information out for the whole county and then maybe use it to hopefully better plan their route. And so we partnered with Waze, which is going to be giving us the type of data that you saw in those blue dots, origin, destination information. But we're also going to be providing to them countywide road closure data so that people will have real time, it's updated every 2 minutes, information on what roads are closed and when, and hopefully Waze can help more effectively route them to avoid those slowdowns. We also want to be able to give people access to, for lack of a better term, I like to call these widgets. And it's this idea that we can use Power BI, which is a business intelligence software, to combine data from a lot of different sources. We can use social media, we can use Uber and Lyft, we can use the SFRTA, the regional transit, Tri-Rail. We can use our mass transit in other locations. What Waze is telling us, we can basically take all different types of data and combine it together in these little self-contained widgets that people can use in real time, not just to see numbers like you see on the right, but to be able to interact with, how the data looks in a visual way so that, it's not just this two-dimensional chart or set of paper maps. Same thing goes here. This is like on the right, you see the typical, this is New York, and this is how many cyclists were killed and injured. And, but not only, would you get that data, but you could actually go and, like a Google Maps type of system, type in an address and zoom in and see, like, oh, well, were there a lot on my route to work, or were there a lot where I like to ride my bike, or, and we can use this information also to try to figure out where dangerous intersections are, collisions are occurring. And again, like I said, we can use the cameras to detect near misses and hopefully be able to make better decisions about the types of safety infrastructure. This is an example of another type of Power BI dashboard where you can integrate real-time information about what's happening on the interstates and how long Uber and Lyft is taking on average to get you from where you're at to, somewhere, as well as, what the trains are doing and when the next trains are coming. So it's basically this idea that you could put everything in one place so that people don't have to open 6 apps or go to a bunch of different websites, that they can get information all in one location. So where does all this data go? So for lack of a better term, we're calling it the county brain, which is like a data trust. It's just the place where we want to put all this information, and we want to be able to give the public access to it through what would be like a data mart, you know, so if you can like imagine like iTunes where you go in and if you want to rent a movie, you can see like a little movie poster, and then maybe you click on it and you can see like a little, you know, explanation of what it's about and maybe like a small preview. So in this data mart would be lots of different little images like I showed you, an explanation of what it does, and you click on it and it says, okay, you know, here's a map of, you know, bus routes, or, you know, where the buses are right now, or and so on. And so we would provide that information, and where would we get it? Well, we're partnering with Waze. How do we show people? Magic Leap is an augmented reality company, which I'm going to show you a little of that in a moment, what that looks like and the difference between it and VR. And then we're also partnering with MIT to do an innovation district where we would test a lot of these technologies, find out what sensors are most robust, give us the most reliable information, can be integrated into our infrastructure. And it's not just surtax related. I mean, it could be things like, you know, when catch basins, which is where stormwater is collected, are clogged, or they're full, or when pipes are flowing or not flowing, or trash cans are full, or, you know, we have air pollution in an area because a lot of vehicles are idling, and maybe we make a change and then, you know, that's improved. And, you know, the idea you guys mentioned earlier about environmental justice, well, it's also this idea that environmental regulations are applied evenly and that everybody has the same right to freedom from, you know, environmental harm and from, you know, the negative effects of certain types of infrastructure that's permitted as part of that process. And so we could put sensors on any number of different types of infrastructure and then make that a part of just the way we do business, right? So as we procure these new types of infrastructure, the sensors are there, all this information is then anonymized, put in the county brain, used to create data for management to have at their fingertips, for decision makers to have at their fingertips, and also for the public to have at their fingertips. And so that's, you know, basically what we're talking about on this slide here. And the idea is, you know, connected freight. Like you look at Amazon, well, where are they going and when? And how is that impacting the fact that, you know, that's only going to probably increase? People aren't going to stores, everything's being delivered. When's it being delivered? Where's it being delivered? How can we, you know, we can identify, just like with those blue dots, we can identify what is an Uber or a Lyft vehicle. We can identify what is an Amazon delivery vehicle, try to figure out where they're going, work with them to try to integrate them into the system. County vehicles, right? We could put GPS in the county vehicles. We can look at, oh, okay, well, they normally go on these routes, and how are they interacting with, you know, the traffic that day, and what are the changes, and does that tell us anything about whether or not there might be a car that's broken down, right? Because who do you call? You don't have to call the police, right? You wait forever for a tow truck. Meanwhile, everybody's like, why is traffic not moving? So this idea that we can use cameras and sensors and things like that to try to determine, you know what, the last time a car was broken down, this is what it looked like. Let's try to figure out if that's what's going on and get there smarter. Same thing with accidents. You can start to predict where accidents have occurred based on movement and the change. And so hopefully we can respond to those before we get the call. Connected Citizens, again, that's the data mart and the portal where we can give people information. And again, it's all just to try to figure out where people are going from and where they're going to, how they're using the infrastructure, and how we can make it easier for them to ride their bike or take transit. I know from my own personal experience, you know, it used to take me 20 minutes to get to work. And it takes 45 to use the train and take the bus. So, you know, for me it was, well, I saved 20 minutes, I'm gonna drive my car. Now, you know, I'd use Waze a lot, and I'll see, you know, this average speed on Broward Boulevard is 10 miles an hour. And, you know, the average speed on 995 was 19 miles an hour. And I looked in my car the other day and just, you know, it had logged the last 2,500 miles I drove. And my average speed over 2,500 miles was 24 miles an hour. And so you think to yourself, you know, I got to up to 50, but for how long? And the reality is you really weren't going that fast, you know? And so if we start to give people that information and they see, you know, I'm really not going more than 20 miles an hour, and now my commute takes me 40 minutes, and, you know, transit's 45, and you start showing them that in a visual way, they might understand, you know what? Maybe it would be time for me to try something else and see, you know, as well as we can figure out where people are coming from and going to, so we can better position bus routes, right? So we can hopefully improve that commute time for them and get them connected up in a way that they can get where they're going using mass transit or greenways, which we're also going to be doing a greenways study. So that's basically why we're doing data. And then, you know, when you look at well, how are we going to get all this done, and where are we going to get it all done? And I think we've talked a bit about corridor delivery. I think I've shown you some of that before. But just this idea that, you know, we don't want to have 53 road closures at once. We don't want to, you know, disrupt people any more than we have to. So we're going to try to combine the projects into these corridors and basically plan everything together so that people can get where they're going, and, you know, we can coordinate amongst, you know, FDOT and MPO and city staff, and hopefully put projects together so we don't build something and then tear it up and then, you know, build something else again. Just very quickly, I'll, let's see here, what is it? Let me just go out and go down here. Just show you this. You might have seen this before. This is sort of like the overview of just a tool. Again, in the future, we'd like this to be more 3D, but this just basically shows you the main corridors, and then this is the list on the left of all the corridors. If on the right hand, you know, you can sort of zoom in and out and see the corridors. On the left, you can just move from corridor to corridor, and it starts to show you, you know, this idea that, okay, so the corridor is a quarter mile on either side of the main thoroughfare because that's considered the walkable distance. And then it basically shows you the standard symbology, which is here, that we've been using to define the projects. And you can click on them and you can see what it is and how much it costs. And, you know, there's this idea that you can just kind of click around and see, oh, you know, they're building, you know, video detection maintenance in this area, or, you know, here's a local bus route. I think the red is rapid bus routes and the cost. And, you know, we've got some generalized information that you can use and that the public can use to try to figure out what projects are going on along these corridors. And as you move down, it just basically moves you from east to west throughout the county, and maintains that symbology. And then if I go back to the slide presentation, so I think I kind of went over why we're doing this, but we're basically just trying to make sure that we don't step on each other's toes. To me, the main part about this slide is, you know, this idea that we want to use 3D imagery, videos, to basically bring things to life for people. Because, you know, I've learned, I'm an engineer, and so, like, I look at a map and I'm like, oh yeah, I know what that is. But I've learned over the years that people have varying levels of being able to look at that and really, you know, appreciate what they're seeing. And they may not want to ask you, or you know, they may think that they know, but maybe there's some misunderstanding. And so we want to really kind of bring that to life for people. And so this is just an example. We don't own this. This is like a picture that I took of a demo that we got. But this is actually downtown Fort Lauderdale. So there's the Bright Line. This is the bus facility. Here's Government Center. This is the main library. But this is basically 3D digital photography overlaid on like a raster skin that they made for the, you know, the downtown. And you can see, you know, you can start to appreciate the height of buildings and the surfacing of buildings. And so the idea would be that map that I just showed you, we can take the features and place them on a map more like this, and people can sort of zoom around and see, oh, that's where they're going to widen the lane or put in that turn lane, or that's where bus rapid transit's going to go, and be able to see it more in a representation of something they're familiar with. And you can zoom down and see it. And then another way that we want to do it is augmented reality. And so this is a mobile phone here in the middle, and it basically just kind of walks you through. This is a augmented reality Statue of Liberty app. I don't know if you've seen it, but it's pretty neat. But if you look there, you'll see it. You know, it even has a shadow behind it. And, you know, the idea here is obviously we wouldn't be placing, but yeah, you can see the shadow right there. But you can basically place these things in specific locations, right? So when somebody goes to the bus bench, you know, and they hold up their phone and you see it's opaque and you can't see through it, it could show you, oh, well, here's the bus schedule of when the bus is going to show up at this bus. Or, you know, here is a building that we're building. And the idea is when you do this and you sort of walk towards it on your phone, you can actually, you know, you get closer to it. It doesn't move. Once it's placed, it stays there. So if you place it in that place and say, well, this is where, you know, the new terminal is going to go, or this is where, you know, the bus bench is going to be, people can just hold up their phone and they can see it. Or we can just bring the various features to people. So when they say, like, you know, what's the 5G sensor going to look like? What does that camera look like? You know, what does this pollution sensor look like? You know, what are you going to be putting in my neighborhood? Well, we can show you one, put it in the room. You can walk up to it. You can see it. You can take a look at it. Or we can place it in that area, and you can go there, and you can see what it's going to look like in that area, so that, you know, people can begin to appreciate, and especially, you know, from the environmental justice standpoint, you know, what is going to be placed in the neighborhood and where. And this is just an example of how you can change that for them. So you can say, oh, we have 4 different alternatives. Maybe people can give us feedback on what they like the best. So this is, the statue's changing color, but the idea is that you can show them, again, different sizes or different shapes or different colors and that sort of thing, and they can walk around and interact with them. And this is in this room, just, it's like, we just put it like right there so that you'd get a sense of what it could look like. And then just another way of doing that without, the augmented reality is, let me just see if I can just go out here and get to it this way. So this is just, you've probably seen this if you tried to buy a house or something like that, just this idea that, you can move around in a map, and this is over by, our offices, but this idea that we can give you a 3D view of everything, and you can sort of zoom around in it and get a sense of, what that project actually looks like, and without you having to go there. So these are just some of the ways that we would hopefully be able to bring these things alive for people and use data to hopefully make better decisions. And I don't know if you want me to go over rail planning or you want somebody else to do that.
Would you do me a favor and turn off the video?
Oh, is it going on in the background? Let's see which ones.
And yes, you can skip the rail planning.
Okay. All right. So that's it then. And if you have any questions, I'd be
Questions?
happy.
Doug?
Good morning, all. First question has to do, and I think I've kind of answered it, but before I say that, if everyone turns to page 86 in their minutes, believe it or not, I read these, and I don't remember hearing this, but I think it's important to understand. We're calling it the Mobility Advancement Program, for now formerly known as the Transportation Surtax. They're advocating changing the name, so I look over here and I go, Mobility Advancement Plan, okay, so that's this is gonna be funded by the Surtax.
So some of it is.
Number one, and number two was, I'm just curious, in the 5-year plan, how much money, I think this is a great tool and we need it.
Mm-hmm.
But obviously now I know, because I know they've changed the name, which I don't agree with, because it's hard enough to follow this. 2 meetings in it, you're changing the name of the Surtax issue. Anyway, how much money do we have any idea in the first 5 years?
So in the original plan that was, put out there, there were like all these backup spreadsheets, and I believe there was like 70 million over the 30 years that was set aside for integrating technology, advanced technology. So basically that's the innovation part of it. So I think it's about 70 million-ish.
In the long term.
Yeah, it's like 3 million a year almost, maybe a little 2.5, something like that.
And I have two minor questions related to what this can do. Fort Lauderdale is known for the worst cycling city in the world, I guess, or second worst, bicycles. I noticed that there were some bicycles shown, things might be done to monitor where we're having problems, what we can do. I would hope that's something that we can look at, because I'm tired of reading about how terrible Fort Lauderdale is in the cycling world. And the last thing is, a lot of people are complaining about commercial trucks speeding. Now, if this thing can track Uber and Lyft and everybody else, can we eventually turn this into requiring all these delivery trucks to be monitored, and we'll know when they're speeding? I know that's Big Brother too much, but now that we're gonna do this, I'm just asking.
Yeah, so on the bike part, so I am gonna be meeting with the University of Florida, and their transportation center actually just got a grant, and they have the pedestrian detection technology, and this idea that we can identify bicycles, we can identify cars, we can identify people, not specific facial recognition though, but just the idea that this is a pedestrian, and then we can sort of start to see if we're identifying near misses between them, so that we can figure out where we might want to make improvements in order to enhance safety for bikes and pedestrians and also for vehicles, because of course, nobody wants to be involved in that type of accident, even if they're the one driving the vehicle. So the idea is yes, we are pursuing that, as far as the innovation district goes, when we partner with MIT, that's where we would pilot a lot of this information. To your question about vehicle speeds and stuff, that is not the intention of this part. And also to your question about it being surtax funded, I just want to point out that there is a portion of this that has a surtax element. There's also a large portion that does not have a surtax element because it could be related to pollution or flooding or, you know, other types of information. So the county does have a general funded component of this that is for, you know, the other types of things that I mentioned. But to me, it's like, that doesn't mean that you can't leverage both in making better decisions, right? Because if we know we got a lot of pollution from vehicles idling in a location, you know, can we address that? And where is that happening? And is there equity, right, when that kind of thing is going on?
Mr. Allen.
Thank you. This is a lot of concepts that we're being exposed to here, many of us for the first time. How robust will be the controls relative to security of this data? I mean, we're fretting about people accessing voter information as a tool of war, if you will. I mean, I can envision somebody accessing your traffic signal network and shutting down selected cities or counties or whatever. You're asking us to take a leap forward into an unknown world here as it relates to personal security, as it relates to information security, and that is a concern that I have going forward with a lot. I mean, the results are impressive, or the potential results are impressive, but unless you deal with the security, unless you deal with the attitude, a developing attitude in the public about personal information security, we need to be very careful in that regard.
Yes, and we do share your concern. So one is we are not going to be collecting personally identifiable information, PII. And in cases where we have that, we keep it in BitLockers, which are like completely offline, secure lockboxes. But the idea is that we would not be collecting that information through this, and it would be anonymized and deaggregated. So it would not be specific to a particular person or their location. A lot of this information is also already being collected, and so we're just kind of leveraging data that's already out there. Like some of the things I showed you with Uber and Lyft and such, I mean, that information is already in possession by those companies. We just are using that information to do analyses. But yes, when we set up the innovation district, that's going to be one of the things that we study, as well as creating like a separate parallel network, and it will not be tied into A, the main county network, ideally, and B, it's not related to the traffic signals, although there will be adaptive signalization. These types of IoT sensors would be in a different type of server and environment. So yes, we would take that very seriously. I've been meeting with our chief information officer about that, and we're going to be engaging many people much smarter than me.
But all of these systems, I mean, you're saying you're going to set up these silos, if you will, of protecting the information, but they're all connected to the Internet of Things, and that is the vulnerability that is out there.
Understood. Yes, agreed.
I think the vulnerability is the fact that you turn on your telephone. Google and Waze, like you said, are the ones that are harnessing all this information, and cities are going to have to go through them to get a lot of the information. So I think it's a complex world we're entering into. My question is, are there other cities right now, and as a group, we got to keep in mind, because I think we start to say, we need this now. We got to, let's go, let's do this. And at the end of the day, we have just started a journey that had we not passed this penny sales tax, had we waited 10 more years, we'd be 10 more years behind. So the fact that we did it, but we're just starting. And so there's a lot of things on the horizon that are going to, all the things that we do are going to make our city, our county, so much better. And I think this one is one of those pieces of one of these ingredients that are key. So are there other cities that have done this, that are doing this, that maybe are ahead of us, that we can use as a model?
Absolutely. In fact, London is considered one of the foremost smart cities, and MIT is basically behind a lot of the stuff they're doing there, which is one of the reasons why we're engaging them. But even locally, Coral Gables has done a lot of things with smart cities and sensors, and I've been meeting with them. And then Denver is very good. Portland is very good. Obviously, San Francisco has a lot of things. Toronto has a lot of lessons learned for people, and I've been reaching out to a lot of them and creating sort of a database of information, and they've been very generous in sharing information with us, as well as some of the local universities. University of Florida has a program, and they're working with, I think it's Gainesville actually, where they're doing some of the the testing for the camera detection technology. So we're going to leverage all of those resources, and that's kind of the first step, I would say. Over the next 12 to 24 months, you'll see us really start to look at what are best practices in other places. I'm an engineer. We don't like reinventing the wheel. It's always better to take something that works and try to keep using it, or improve upon it even better. And so yes, that is the tack that we're going to take.
And so I took notes, so I'm going to be hitting you with a few questions. So one of those YouTubes that you had up there you had a software producer or somebody that maybe is in Waze or Google that was up there. I don't know who it was, but he was looking at the lights in the city, and he was explaining how incredible the information is and how you can harness it. So there must be a company or somebody out there, or a firm or a group of firms that are putting together software. Are we going to be looking for those kinds of firms or groups to assist?
Yes, so we've already met with the company that produced this information, is called Streetlight, and that's one that's MPO. We've talked with them about it. Some of the Fort Lauderdale interested. We also went with talked to a company called Teralytics, and we have another company that was just at the Fort Lauderdale conference not too long ago that we're going to be meeting with, as well as that's one of the things we tasked MIT with as part of the scope of things that we're going to have them do, is identify other sources of information. And the idea here is that I don't think any one data set is perfect, right? We can get stuff from AT&T, we can get stuff from Waze, we can get stuff from Google. We also want to start collecting our own county data sets using things called Blue Toads, and our own cameras and sensors and things like that. And then we might get data from the scooter companies about where people are getting on the Lime scooter and where they're getting off and how long they're riding. Data from Uber and Lyft as far as how people are doing rideshare. And what we want to do is stitch together all these different sources of data and hopefully come up with a more robust data set. So yes, to your point, we're going to be looking for all the different places where we can glean just that little bit of extra information, because we want to get it right, and we want to be able to continue to iterate and improve.
But then it leads to a place to go, whether it's an app on your phone or a website on your computer, a place to go where Broward County, or whatever you want to call it, mobility advancement, someone just me, who maybe doesn't ride the bus, is going to say, I got to keep this thing on my phone because I can get an Uber, I can see what the fastest way is for me to get to Davie, all these things, and it becomes something you want. I think when you market it, I think it's very important, the marketing, and you want to take it out of you want to let the public look at it as something more advanced than a government place to go, because people kind of don't go there, right?
Right.
So it has to be attractive, just like Uber's attractive, just like Google's attractive, and you got to want to have that. You got to want to have that thing on in the morning before you go to work, or in your car, or on your phone when you decide what bus route you're going to take. Or so, you know where I'm going with that?
I do actually. That's exactly the way I feel about it too. I can give you an example. When we started doing electronic inspections initially, and we'd hand people, a $2,000 laptop, and they're like, I have one of those. And it was very difficult, in fact, impossible to get our elevator inspectors and some other people to actually go out and do it. They were still coming back and typing it in. And then we started using iPads, and they're $400 or $500, but
Yeah.
it was the idea that they had this cool piece of technology. It was easy for them to use. It booted up really quickly, and we had some of our inspectors that were, you know, of retirement age, and you know their kids were like, hey, you know, you have an iPad, that's really cool, how do you, you know, and so that they would use it, and we got to 100% electronic inspections using that. And so to me, it's this idea that we have to make it attractive, we have to make it look good, and we're going to be hiring 3D artists, and we're going to be doing things to brand and market. I know Gretchen's working on a lot of that, and the idea would be, yes, this is something that isn't just, you know, what we've typically given people, which is, you know, the government issued version of something, but rather something that they're going to want to use because it looks good and because it works properly and it, you know, it meets their expectations. You know, I always tell people, like I mentioned, you know, modeling our data mart off of iTunes, and when we did our e-permitting system, we modeled it off of Amazon. You know, just this idea that we want to make it familiar to people and as easy to use as that. And a lot of the stuff I'm showing you today, I mean, people kind of expect it, and if we don't do it, we're sort of behind. And so this idea that we would bring it to them in a way that they want to use is key. I totally agree with you.
And then the marketing, you know, for Gretchen, not only should we market like in your face, you know, but as we're moving forward, the information that we're releasing just to show people that we're advancing should be, we should show people this, that this is the future and this is where your taxes are going, and this is awesome. And so I think marketing from a direct target market to target your products, in addition to target marketing what it is that this group is doing and that the county commissioners are doing with your money, I think is also super, super important. Yes, Ms. Kelly.
I just wanted to add to what you're saying. Thank you very much for the presentation. This is all happening in the context of people getting tickets and fined for texting while driving. So in terms of the marketing, you're marketing something that you could create almost an app defense to the, you know, somebody gets pulled over for using their phone while they're in the car, and on 595, as we know, there are no lanes anymore to pull over and, you know, check your phone while you're not driving. And so I'm just saying that in terms of the marketing and selling this to the public as a very good thing. I mean, I met the head of Florida's Department of Elder Affairs yesterday, and he was very impressed with what Broward County is doing in Florida vis-a-vis transportation. But in the context of no texting while you're driving, and that's, you know, problematic, we need to say why creating this thing is a good thing, and there is a way to use it that isn't distracting or going to be a danger to the public. But it's a very good thing, you know.
Did you want to say something, George?
I did. Thank you, Chair. I had a couple questions of Lenny. Thanks for your presentation. Wanted to go to the cost real quickly. $70 million over 30 years. What did you do, or your office do to arrive at that figure?
So I actually wasn't involved in the computation of that amount. It was something I think that was put together as part of the original Surtax budget. As far as how far that will go, whether or not that will be enough, one of the ways that we want to try to leverage that investment is to basically provide updated specifications for, you know, regular procurements, right? So rather than use that money to go and buy a bunch of sensors, I think the idea is that I don't think we'd get very far if we did that. What we want to do is identify what types of sensors work the best and are most robust and provide great value, and then incorporate them into our purchasing specs. And when we purchase and procure equipment in the future, it will include that type of, you know, information. Like one of the big challenges I think for us going forward is going to be 5G. I don't know if you've been following that, but 5G is incredible. I mean, it's you know 10 to 100 times faster mobile internet than we currently have today. Many of the things that IoT relies on really need 5G as a backup. Part of the problem with 5G though is it's very small mesh. You've got a lot of small sensors everywhere, and there's a lot of pushback around the country over putting these things on light poles and them just sticking out and, you know, not meshing in or being bolted on the side of buildings. And a lot of people are like, you know, it's blocking my view, or I don't like it. And so I think part of this is identifying, you know, like one of the things we looked at are light poles that incorporate 5G, and you can't even see it, right? And so that might be part of this as well. So the idea would be that we would provide information and then people would hopefully use it, but we can't mandate it, right?
Right, and I guess my concern is, or at least my question to you is, as we move forward, I'm sure you're being approached by a lot of vendors, given the significant resources that are coming into Broward County, to sign on to all the bells and whistles. So how will we manage that incrementally moving forward to be, conscious of cost and benefit?
Right, so actually, yeah, I've been with the county for about 20 years, and I've run the building department and a lot of special purpose funds, and for me, it's always about value, right? And about, only buying things that we can actually use and only buying as much of that thing that we can actually use. So when we've talked to a lot of vendors, we basically look at, well, I understand that this is the big package, but, I only want this much, and, maybe I even want to test it and find out, and, and over time, I think over time we want to build our own data and own that data, and I think that will be a tremendous value to the county. I don't know how it's going to be used or what kind of value it will generate for the county, but we're not interested in, like Toronto's a good example, right? They basically said, hey, let's do the sidewalk labs thing, and Google can come in, and a lot of people got really nervous about that, and we're not interested in handing over our information to people for free. Nor are we interested in paying for things that we don't need to pay for or more than we need to pay for. And I would anticipate over time that the type of data that we have will be much more valuable than anything that we can then obtain in the private market. And so, when we've looked at some of these technologies, we've said, okay, we might just want to buy enough to do a particular study rather than, I might be interested, and I've challenged staff for this too. I said, what kind of questions do you want to have answered? What types of things do we think we need to know, right? Don't just assume that we need to know everything. Let's be very measured about the types of data we want to procure and the types of studies. And so the streetlight data one, for example, you can pay a bunch of money and get the whole thing, or you can just pay for a project and just look at, one thing. And so the idea is let's see what that tells us and what we can learn. And then a lot of the software, we haven't even procured it yet. Like a lot of this stuff I'm showing you is just stuff that we're thinking about. And as part of the Surtax, there will be professionals that will be coming on board, and we're going to elicit their expertise as well in making the best decisions, as well as not involving us in any long-term obligations. So I would say, just in general, that I always treat it like a business, and that we want to make the best investments. And I always tell my staff and myself, I'm not going to do anything that I would be embarrassed to have on the front page of the Sun Sentinel tomorrow. And as long as I do that, then I feel like I will be wisely investing.
Great. And kind of just one last subject I want to touch on, and Phil raised this initially, are privacy concerns. I think we all realize that we're heading into it's not your dad's Cadillac anymore. We're heading into a new future. But it sounds like the county will be collecting data. We'll be using sensors to, sense movement or sounds, and using cameras that will take pictures of pedestrians and vehicles. And, that data is valuable to a lot of people, not just to manage traffic. Have you been approached by other government agencies or other people that might want to share in that data?
Not yet. I mean, I know that probably that day will come, but as far as what we're going to do with the data and how we're going to use it, it's not surveillance technology. It's not intended to do facial recognition or to take recordings of people. It's most of it is going to be based off of data analysis that would basically just detect movements and give us information about it. It's intended to just sort of, for planning purposes. I mean, I'm an engineer. I'm in environmental organization for a long time, and so the way we think about usage is different than, let's say, the police department. So, and we're not the police department, and we're not affiliated with them, and so obviously, I guess those decisions will have to be made when they get to it. I don't even know if it'd be mine, but that's not where we're going with it, and that's not our goal.
Okay. I think that's it. Thank you.
Ms. Love?
Thank you for the presentation, excellent, and excited about bringing data and helping us to see the reality of things. I did have a question on the economic side as it related to your slide, and it talked about creating the county brain and saying it's a general fund initiative. So I just needed clarity of that point. I think you said that we are using Surtax dollars. I wasn't sure what that component of, if the number is 70 million over the course of the 30 years. So if you could just provide clarity of the bullet point, but also how that ties to the economic side of the Surtax dollars and what part of that is general fund.
Excellent. Yes. So basically, the surtax is specific to those items that are part of the original surtax plan, basically transportation, mobility, that kind of thing. And to the extent that we can advance technology in the mobility sector, that's where that 70 million would go and where those projects are. The reason why the county brain is a general fund initiative is that, you know, and it gets back to some of the conversations we've had before about silos. And this is not just for surtax purposes, but just for overall in the county, where, you know, there's a lot of information out there, right? Unfortunately, a lot of it is in multiple systems that can't speak with one another. A lot of it is siloed off for only a certain group of people, and so they may know something and this other group knows something else, and nobody's able to put that together. And so as part of the county brain, what we would be doing is taking and putting straws into all those locations, and then we have a system called Power BI, which is Power Business Intelligence, that can translate things from the county's accounting software, things from, let's say, airport trip arrival information, you know, port information, stuff about, you know, where our taxis are and how they're being used, and information about traffic signals, maybe information about our flooding and our pumps, and, you know, information about where we're experiencing damage during an event, and, you know, what our vulnerable areas are. Basically, a lot of different information that has nothing to do with the surtax will go in there as well. But the idea is that it can be used for the surtax, but it's not collected by the surtax or the prerogative of the surtax. So there's basically two separate groups. One group in the surtax that would be doing surtax only stuff, and then a general funded group that would be doing more of the county-wide stuff. They'll all be putting their information in the county brain. They'll all be able to share in each other's data, but they'll be collecting it separately, and they may have separate ways of using that information, or separate presentations in the data mart, right? Because one of the things that you'll find is that, you know, you can use GIS, I don't know if you're familiar, but, you know, you can go in and you can add 100 different layers, right? And then you gotta label those layers properly and color them properly, and before you know it, you're 6 hours in and you've got all this information and you're not sure how to make it look. So it's all there, but it's all in one place. And so what we're gonna do with the widgets in the data mart is take specific presentations of that and pre-package them and make them in a way that's useful, as well as combine them with things that aren't traditionally in GIS, like, you know, could be social media data, could be, you know, something from an outside company that's not in the county's system, but we would basically be able to put a straw in and grab that information and put it in our widget. So they are related, but they're separate. You're welcome.
Did you want to, Mr. Allen? You're good?
I'm good.
Okay, I just have one more thing, and I don't know if this is way out there, but it's not that far out there. So, you know, the Waze and Google Maps, again, you look at it and it tells you where to go, but as you're going, 15 minutes later, it may have slowed down because it's using real-time information, and not only that, it's probably telling 100 other people that are doing the same thing I'm doing to go that route, right? So then all of a sudden, if your information is pushing everyone to the most rapid way, eventually it becomes the least rapid way. Anticipatory information is going to be where it's at, I'm quite sure, if it's not already being applied to these software. What's your thought on that?
So that's where AI comes in, and a lot of this recognition of collisions or near misses between pedestrians and vehicles and other things is basically based on training the AI to recognize specific situations, and as well as once you start collecting more data, you become smarter and smarter about when you've seen this before and what that entailed last time, and so you start to be able to predict what might happen this time, right? So yeah, there will be a role for that. In fact, that a lot of that's being done now, and that would be our goal, right? To be able to use this information to anticipate what's going to happen when that change is made. And, as well as, when you start to look at transportation modeling, right, you've got your typical demand models, and we've got, how are people moving right now? And, we collect some information, and how do we think people are going to move in the future? But, the goal with this is hopefully be iterative and interactive. And so we'll be able to produce better models, and we'll be able to more accurately mimic, well, what would happen if everybody started taking rideshare in this area, or what would happen if we tear down this, change and make this. So we're going to hopefully start to anticipate those things. Yes.
Thank you. Any other questions from the board? That was an awesome portion of this meeting. Thank you so much. Appreciate it. Do you guys mind if we take a 10-minute break? Are you good with that?
Yes.
Thank you. Okay, we're going to restart the meeting. So the next section of the agenda is for public participation. And if there's anyone in the audience that from the public that would like to speak on any mobility-related topic, you may do so for 2 minutes. And if you have anything to say on the action items that are coming up on our agenda, then please feel free to come forward. There's a sign-in sheet, and you can put your name in to speak on any of the 4 items that we have on our agenda. Okay? Is there anybody from the public who would like to speak? Okay. Seeing that there's no one from the public that wants to speak, we'll move on to our action items. And the first item on the agenda is the approval of the minutes for the meeting of April 25th, 2019. Doug?
I have 2 changes or corrections.
Okay.
The first one is we have, on page 1, we have Alan Hooper in there twice. And on page 16, he's twice as good as most people, but
Yeah,
I don't
twice
think he
as
needs to
bad.
take up the space. On page 16, under midway through, I make a comment, well, I guess it had to do with, and then the next paragraph is actually Mr. Allen, and I confirmed with him, he did say that. So add Mr. Allen there. The rest of the minutes, with the exception of, if you turn to page 52 and 53, and I'm one of the worst culprits here, you see why we could help make the minutes smaller, because all these unidentified speakers are coming because we're not turning our speakers off and it's picking up the next person. It would make these at least 4 or 5 pages shorter, and I'm probably the biggest culprit there. So comment there is simply we need to learn how to use how to use these microphones. Other thing that may sound strange, I did read them yesterday because I couldn't go fishing, and it's amazing what we covered and how educational it was, and some of the things that, the one thing that I've already pointed out on page 86, I didn't realize that you said you're now calling this the mobility advancement program versus the transportation surtax. Now we're still, you might want to explain to me, Gretchen, and the group, why we're doing that, because I was confused. I don't even remember hearing that, but.
So thank you, Vice Chair. The transportation surtax is a source of revenue. So the mobility advancement program is what's being funded with the transportation surtax. So the way that we are trying to describe the projects and the plan for mobility transformation in the community over the 30 years is the mobility advancement program. Keep in mind, we are, thanks to you approving our FY19 budget, we are in the process of selecting an external firm or group of firms that would be able to come in and say, actually, there may be a different branding or different messaging, or this is what we are proposing, this is what we're using now to talk about the plan. But the transportation surtax will always be described as our revenue source.
Did you want to say something, Ms. Pennant?
I'm just hoping that there will be some real marketing. I just think losing the term transportation in it creates a disconnect, I think, with the public, because they voted on a transportation penny tax, and so I think we should keep the word transportation in there because it keeps the focus on our purpose.
So does anybody want to make a motion to approve the minutes based on the changes that Doug?
I so move.
Second.
Okay. Any other comments on the motion? All those in favor? Aye.
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 Those opposed? Is that okay?
Sorry,
Okay.
aye.
Thank you. All right, the next item on the agenda is the financial audit engagement of RSM US LLP. Gretchen, do you want to lead that?
I did invite both the CFO and representatives from RSM to return to the meeting. I'm not sure if anyone is here from RSM. Okay. Seeing no one here, I know you all asked if you would be able to receive the engagement letter, the details, before you voted on whether or not to select RSM to do the audit, financial audit. And then you all also wanted to have a discussion, and that's part of the discussion area of the agenda, about the performance. So this is here for you all to take action on whether or not to engage RSM for our financial audit.
Mr. Allen?
First off, I believe the letter, the proposed addressing of the audit opinion should be a joint addressing to the Broward County Board of County Commissioners and this board, since the ordinance does say that we shall engage and we shall have the audit done. The county selects. But just as with the sheriff and the property appraiser, or those are joint letters that are written both to the county commission as well as that elected official. And as a set independent board, they should be addressing it to us also. Secondly, there's a couple references to this Surtax board with some language that doesn't seem to be appropriate. I need to find that. At one place they refer to it as
The county's public transportation sales tax fund.
right. Well, that's I don't think that was referring to the board. The fund, I believe, is okay. Let me see if I can find that. On page 2, there's a reference that says, we will meet with the Transit Tax Advisory Board. I don't know where they came up with that reference.
Phil,
Be the Surtax Board.
I'm sorry, what page and paragraph is that on?
About halfway through down the page, or a third on page 2.
Page 2, fourth paragraph.
That's all I had.
I have a question as it relates to how much this is costing to accomplish this on behalf of our board. And is Surtax, I'm assuming Surtax money would be used for this, but in terms of the engagement, I would want to know how much is this for us, if anything. I would think there's some cost tied to it, but I don't know.
I was not given a number that was coming from the Surtax, so I'll have to go back to Mr. Tablack to see if that is something that is coming forward as part of the FY20 budget request that we're putting together to bring to you in June.
Knowing the county's budget process, you can rest assured that there will be a charge to this board for this particular service. I think it references $6,000
It does.
as the cost for this.
Where does it reference that number?
Page 4, just below the numeral number 5, below that, the paragraph after that. Yeah, Doug?
Yeah, we spent a lot of time talking about changing the 90 days to 180. Is that something that should have been in here? I didn't see it, but we,
Okay.
remember we
No,
talked
that-
about giving them
I'm sorry.
180 days? And
Mr. Chairman, that's part of the ordinance that the county will have to update, I believe, and it's up as a separate item.
so it doesn't need to be in here?
No.
Okay.
Do we have any other questions? So, you want them to amend that?
I would move approval. I will move approval. There, I got the microphone.
Does anybody want to second that?
I second.
Okay. Any other question? Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
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 Those opposed? Okay, it's approved.
Excuse me, I didn't make it clear, I don't believe in the minutes, that the approval was based on the changes that we had approved, or that approval motion was based on those changes.
Very good. Okay, the next item is Governance Oversight Board Rules of Procedure, Exhibit 4. And so Gretchen and I had some conversations about the board's authority and a variety of things, and I think it's important that we discuss it a little bit more. And Gretchen, I'm going to let you lead, if you could, please.
Sure, absolutely. So what the Chair Hooper and I discussed is actually number one and under your discussion items, being able to have a conversation about the full role of the board with respect to performance audits. We also have an element of the discussion item number 3, where each of you will have an opportunity to ask for particular presentations or information that you would like brought forth during your retreat and the budget workshop that's scheduled for the end of June. At this point, and thanks to Angela Wallace very much for her assistance in getting the amendments that you all requested to your Oversight Board Rules of Procedure that's before you. We tried to capture all of the requested changes to the draft that we brought to you last month. And I'm going to let Angela, if you'd like, to talk through some of the highlights of the specific changes.
Thank you. So I know one of the, can you hear me now? The light is on. One of the requests from the last meeting was an attendance policy. And based upon the attendance requirements related to county boards that's provided in section or chapter 1-233 of the County Code of Ordinances. So, and excused absences and the like. So this board, according to the ordinance that created the board, has to meet a minimum of 4 times a year, once a quarter. And this board can meet more than that, and so the attendance requirements based upon other boards that meet that criteria as outlined in 1-233 would be if the board meets on a quarterly basis or less frequent basis, a member shall be subject to removal from the Oversight Board by the appointing authority if he or she has 2 consecutive unexcused absences or misses 2 properly noticed meetings in a calendar year. And then if the Oversight Board meets more frequently, and this is on page 2 of 3, the attendance requirements. If you meet a member shall be subject to removal from the Oversight Board by the appointing authority if he or she has 3 consecutive unexcused absences or misses 4 properly noticed meetings in a calendar year. So because this board will be meeting more often, the attendance requirements under subsection 1 wouldn't apply as we've scheduled throughout this year. The ones for under 2 would be applicable based upon the schedule that this board has set. And then excused absences are outlined in paragraph 3. And if you're performing an authorized activity related to Oversight Board business that directly conflicts the death of the immediate family member, and that's defined, board members' hospitalization or some legal proceeding that would require the Oversight Board member to miss a scheduled meeting. So, and the other issue that was raised was, I guess it was with regard to officers. And so the members of this board are appointed by the appointing authority, with the exception of the one, which is Ms. Pendant's position, which is the position provided in the ordinance, provides that the person that holds that position is the Office of Supplier Diversity at Broward College is automatically a member of the board. Everyone else was selected by the appointing authority. And so removal of everyone other than that one member is by the appointing authority, not by the members of this body. The members of this body select the officers, which are the chair and the vice chair. And I think what was requested was that the chair and the vice chair would hold their positions for 2 years. And so the term for the chair and the vice chair on page 3, 6B, reflects that the chair and vice chair who were elected in February of 19 have a 2-year term through January 2021, because I think initially when we took this vote in February, they decided on 6 months, and then our last meeting, everyone decided that it would be 2 years, and thereafter, the chair and vice chair will be elected every 2 years. So those modifications have been made.
Are there any questions to the modifications? Okay.
Where's that language with the exception piece? I think I missed it when you were saying it.
Ms. Pennant, can you speak a
Sorry.
little louder? You were on.
I was looking for the language where you speak of the exception. Is it in there? I didn't see it.
No, we didn't put it in here. It's in the ordinance, but
So it's implied? Is that what
no,
you're saying?
it's in the ordinance, and the ordinance controls the makeup of this body.
Okay.
Okay.
All
But
right.
if
I
you-
just wanted, it's not stipulated per se, so I wondered whether or not it's important to put it in there.
If you'd like.
I think it should be in there.
Okay, so we're making an amendment to our policy, and we're adding another amendment. We're adding some more language based on what Ms. Pennant just suggested. So should we?
It would be under term, because I think it reflects that the term of the appointments is 4 years. All right?
Yes, with the exception.
And so it would simply reflect with the exception of that, of the position, and I would list the position as it's outlined, yeah.
Thank you.
The director of the Broward College of Office of Supplier Relations and Diversity.
Okay, good.
We don't need to vote on that, do we? The changes to this? Okay. All right. One other thing that I wanted to clarify with everybody, and one of the things that I didn't really understand, and I think maybe Gretchen's pretty good at this, or Angela, is our authority and why we're here. And I wanted to know if we were just supposed to make sure that these projects, after the county goes through them and submits them to us, that they meet a budget. And it's more than that. It also requires that we determine whether or not the type of program performs or will perform to the satisfaction of the taxpayers that we represent. Or even after the fact, when the stuff is put on in operation, there's going to be performance measures that we've discussed in the last meeting that will also put the onus on us to determine whether or not something that's in operation is meeting the objectives of the surtax on behalf of the taxpayers. So I think that to me, I didn't know how deep it went, and I would ask that Gretchen or Angela give us a little bit deeper background on that.
So as you'll note on your agenda, I guess we're gonna skip over the last action item. No, it's totally fine, because it's related. It's very related. So
Okay.
the role of the Oversight Board in project oversight is actually delineated in section 31.575J of the ordinance. It's fine. So I'm going to read aloud here for the benefit of those in the audience. Project oversight. All approved projects and expenditures shall be subject to the Oversight Board's review, critique, and analysis for the duration of the project or expenditure. The Oversight Board shall issue annual reports on the performance of ongoing projects and shall provide recommendations for any proposed performance improvements. Because of that requirement in the ordinance, we as staff made recommendations about staffing that we brought to you. And you noted that a program performance analyst was one of the positions that was requested by administration. And the reason for that is we recognize that if we don't begin at the ground floor developing performance measures, being able, and that was one of the reasons I asked the question of Erica Lychak, is if we don't know what it is that we intend to do and how it is that we're going to measure whether or not we've done it, we can't help you do the types of performance audits and the reporting that you're required to do under the ordinance. So with Lenny's help, with data collection, and with the engagement of a globally recognized nonprofit, which you also approved as part of the FY19 budget, it's going to come in and give us some recommendations about the types of performance measures and data that we need to collect to talk about performance of a mobility system. We feel it will be very difficult to provide you with, the level of support that you will need to do this. So we're building that. We intend to be bringing that to you on a regular basis and getting your feedback about the recommendations. You're going to be an integral part of the engagement of that nonprofit entity, and they will be, interviewing you and probably coming here and making a presentation to talk about some of the things that they're seeing across the world in transportation initiatives. They're particularly interested in data transparency and utilizing data in a way that's actually accessible to the public. They're going to be making recommendations about that too, because we're going to collect a lot of data about the performance of our program, but will it be meaningful? Will people understand it? And does it actually tell the story in a way that's impactful?
Does anybody have any comments or questions? Doug?
I have one related to the time that we have to review a project. Last month, you said we had like 120 days. I don't understand why we have 120 days. I can see 30 or 60, but to me, you bring something to us and we have 4 months. Why is that?
Well, because of the way that the ordinance is drafted, you are only required to meet by the ordinance quarterly. So it was giving you, if you had come together and determined that you only wanted to meet quarterly and not monthly, then you would obviously have until your very next meeting to make those deliberations about a project.
Well, then.
It's your maximum not to exceed. But we would certainly hope that it would not be 4 months.
It just seems to be ineffective, not needed. I mean, it's
Right, but we might have a problem with a project, and it might get delayed 30 more days till the next meeting, and it might even get delayed again. So having it as a maximum, I don't think is an issue.
Okay.
Look, that's my opinion.
I thought it had something to do with how the funding is dispensed. Wasn't that part of the reason? No?
Mr. Allen?
When will we start to see performance measures? I mean, we approved a lot of stuff the last meeting and startup budget, and we recognized that these are things that needed to get done now, but it had delays for certain things. At a minimum, I'm feeling uncomfortable not knowing when these projects are expected to be completed, i.e. when are the bus routes going to be expanded to meet, which is going to be required, not only getting new buses, but the hiring the drivers, et cetera, et cetera. So, I mean, I've been uncomfortable knowing when, we approve something, when that project is going to come. I mean, we want to be able to show the accomplishment of what we're intended to do here to improve mobility, but without some target date, we're left sort of hanging.
So I'm going to ask Tim Garling to join me, Deputy Director of Transportation, to talk about that. When you all did approve the FY19 proposed expenditures and proposed projects, there were timeframes that were provided. Obviously, they're inside of that FY19 period. And Tim, do you want to talk a little bit about what you're seeing?
Yes, so from what was approved at the last meeting, it was for fiscal 19 about a 10% increase in service. And that's going to take place really in 2 phases in fiscal 19. So the first phase we expect to do in mid-July, and the second phase towards the end of September. So by the end of this fiscal year, we'll have that entire first 10% service increase up and running.
And I think it's important to show when those buses go on the street, those expanded services, that there is some notice that in fact this is brought to you by a penny for transportation, or whatever our modical is going to be.
Right. Absolutely. So this is where we see the 108 bus drivers that are brought to bear, some 30 additional buses to do those services, the public information of the routes and that information getting out. So not only do the public get to know those routes, but they'll know what the funding source is. And this is just the beginning. You know, there'll be future increases that will be coming to you for fiscal 20 and beyond.
I agree with you, Mr. Allen, and I honestly, I think, I asked this question last month. Again, it's very touchy-feely, visual. We're not sure if it matters. I think it does. But I did bring up something last month about Wi-Fi and, the quality of the bus, whether it's a hybrid or an electric bus. And then I was told that it does say that on the side of the buses, and I drove past the bus, and I looked, and yeah, there's a very small indication that we are Wi-Fi. But in my opinion, those are the benefits that are going to get choice riders to step onto the bus, okay? And so I'd have it. Exactly. And I would also, if we put some electric buses on the street, I would call it an electric bus and really brand the heck out of it, because I think those things are what drive today's the younger folks that are starting in work right now, that are in their 20s and their mid-30s. They really do care about social equality. They care about things like the environment, and it drives them to certain places, even restaurants that serve local food. So those kind of things are important, and I think we got to put this stuff. I think marketing is a huge part of where the surtax could help to fund quality marketing that maybe takes us a little bit out of the box of where we've been in the past.
May I?
And so we are on performance. Okay, I'm sorry. Ms. Pennant, and then Mr. Kuhlman.
Well, just to piggyback a little bit on what Phil is saying in terms of the unknown components of what we're expected to do, and I've said this too, I'm really interested in understanding what the job opportunities are going to be, so we can inform the community to be more proactive in getting the right people trained for those jobs, and by the same token on the small business component segment. And we know that 30% is a big part of the requirements in the ordinance. And so we need to be really proactive in getting an understanding of what trades will be expected to work on some of these projects. And I'm not sure what the strategy is in terms of getting that information, but we want to get that information so we can start the training right away.
Doug?
Yes, because this is our first step out of the box, I assume we're going to have great data on the system before it's implemented, ridership, and you're going to have weekly or monthly that we can very easily see what improvements we've made. Is that correct?
Yes, we basically do sort of a monthly ridership report. So we'll be able to compare the increases for all these services on a route-by-route basis. We'll be able to estimate and show what the differences are.
I would think and request that 90 days after this is improved, I'd like to see that report. Here's where we were, here's where we were, and one is 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, so we can have something to judge it by.
And could I just add that the ridership is actually one of those things that builds over time, right? So as you have the initial start, it'll start to grow and should grow as time goes on. So probably ongoing monitoring of those services is probably
All right,
useful.
what time frames would you suggest then?
No, I think what you're suggesting is just fine. The only point I'm just making is that probably is not the destination. You know, we're not going to know the full benefit within the first 30 or 60 or 90 days. Ridership we would expect to grow as the service grows, as these services are better known and people start to use them. So it's something that we should continue to monitor.
Especially if we have Wi-Fi on half the bus
So,
and electric bus on the other half.
so on the TMA, we always did a year over year. It starts to become a little more helpful on a monthly basis, but Tim's right. I mean, it takes a little bit of time before you, and then you start to learn how to look at the numbers, because if you're increasing service on an existing route, then it's going to be hard in those first few months to determine the matrix of what 30% more service does and how much of that is coming from, you know, so it's going to take, we're going to have to learn how to read these ridership reports.
Well, the other thing that's going to help, a lot of people don't know that people do take the bus. I mean, who takes the bus? That's all I hear. So just having the baseline before we start is going to be helpful.
Yeah, I would like to say, you know, right now we have over 27 million people on an annual basis or 27 million rides on an annual basis. So we have a second largest transit system in the state of Florida. So we already have robust service, and these improvements are only going to increase.
Right. Mr. Allen.
But it does bring up a point as it relates to performance measuring. I think it's important to get that consultant or whoever that is that's going to come in and give us some feedback, because ridership is only one component of performance of the bus system. You've got also the impact on traffic. If you take people out of cars, you hopefully improve the headway, if you will, for private vehicles at the same time. So performance measures are not an easy thing to develop and monitor and report, but it's something we need to do from the very beginning. When do we expect to have that consultant on board?
We could not agree with you more. It's something that I feel passionately about, and Angela and I are doing our final negotiations with that group, that nonprofit organization, tomorrow. The plan is to have them on board by mid-June, so that they are working on this as we're building the system, as we're building the program, as we're identifying what types of data, so that Lenny, when he talks about creating those packages of data, we know exactly what we are looking for and what we're trying to evaluate. And we are hoping to have something for you and for the public to react to as far as their recommendations. They'll be interacting with you probably by phone, because they are Canadian. But this is going to be happening over the course of the next 6 months. And they have to have it done as part of their contractual obligations by December, because we know that that's when many of these projects are really going to get off the ground.
What is the background of that firm, or that not-for-profit?
They are called Open North. What they do is they are usually brought in through research universities. And they partnered with the UN, with the World Health Organization, I believe. They've worked on some smart city initiatives, which is how I came to know about them. And they primarily focus on data transparency and performance measures of larger systems, including whole countries. They've gone into several Central Asian countries of late, and some Central and South American countries, and looked at what are they doing, what are they collecting, and then how are they actually using that information to improve the quality of their services, the way that they engage their citizenry. Lately, they've been doing more in the performance measure area, which is why they're interested in this particular engagement. They look across systems, so they look at macro data, and then what we're hoping is that they're going to look at statewide data. A lot of times we are asked to compare ourselves as Broward County against the state, and it's not really, it's not an apples to apples comparison at all when you try to, disaggregate that data down to Broward County. We want to have some idea of what do we need to do to help you all do your job? There are different audiences. What do we need to do to help the community understand what's happening? And then, of course, at the federal level, how do we need to be able to market ourselves to be more competitive with grants? What types of data do we need to be collecting so that we can provide better performance analytics and needs assessments and all of that?
Okay. Yeah, I think it's pretty important. And then how do you establish or determine new riders and who our customer is and how it's changing? I mean, it'd be interesting to hear from them on how they are going to do that. I'm sorry, Gretchen, that I jumped to the next one, but do we want to stop at that point and just go back and then come? Okay. So let's go back to the proposed project. Thank you, Tim. To the proposed project and proposed expenditure. City of Sunrise, Broward County, new request for full interchange at Sawgrass Expressway and Pat Salerno Drive, Exhibit 5.
Ready? I'm Larry Mahoney. I'm with Broward County. I'm with County Administration. I'm the Director of Real Estate Development for Broward County. Okay. We're here today to ask Broward County, the Oversight Board, to approve a new project for the Surtax. It is for a full interchange at the Sawgrass Expressway and Pat Salerno Drive. It includes some of the collector feeder roads that are with it. This project is being constructed with the state of Florida Turnpike Enterprise, where they will put up 50% of the money, and we'll put up, the city and the county put up the balance. At this point, we're still in negotiations with the Turnpike Enterprise and the state to see if we can get some more money from them. We're expecting a response back very shortly. Our request today is to have this project included as a project for the Surtax. We're asking for a total of $25 million over the project. We believe that should, with what we're hoping to get with the Turnpike Enterprise, will cover the amount that we need. We believe that's something that we can work with. Presently, we're in the process of working with the Turnpike Enterprise to get a local funding agreement. They are behind schedule by about 2 weeks right now in getting that to us. We do have a deadline to have that executed by June the 14th. And if it's not executed by then, the project will not move forward. So today, part of what we're looking for is we're told that the part of the funding will be for the design and construction. The second portion will be for the acquisition of right-of-way, land for drainage, land for mitigation for wetlands that will be required, and the third tranche will be for the actual construction. Those will be broken down to where the first part for the design and construction will be due within 30 days after the local funding agreement is signed, and then approximately a year later, the part for the acquisition of right-of-way, mitigation land, and drainage land will be required. And then later on after that, probably somewhere around the 3 to 4 year mark when they start construction, the balance will be due before they start construction. So what we're looking at today as part of our request is $4.5 million not to exceed amount for the design and construction for just the portion of the Pat Salerno Sawgrass Expressway interchange and the collector feeder roads that go along with that. We do apologize that we're late. However, we do have had problems getting the agreement with the local funding agreement. Part of that is the state is considering giving us more money, and we don't have the details. So that's why we apologize for being at this point in time, coming in front of you, not giving you more chance. But we do need to get this moving forward. The county has to approve it. We're planning to approve this, and we will get back to you with our documents from the approval of the board. We're hopefully on the June 11th, we'll do the final approval for this and get back to you afterwards.
Does anybody have any questions, comments? Yes, Ms. Kelly.
What is given that they're 2 weeks behind on negotiations, so we don't have hard figures, what is the source of this hard deadline of June 14th? I mean, is there any give there?
I just got back correspondence last night from the Turnpike Enterprise. They're still trying to make our deadlines. They know that we have to have a vote by June the 11th. If not, then it goes into August when the county's in a summer recess when we can get back to them. They're still working on that. Their date of 14th might slide a few days, but not much more than that. And they're anticipating that they can hopefully get this to us by our June 11th and get on our agenda.
So there's no opportunity for a July deadline, say, before the August recess?
Not for the county, because our board has to approve this.
Okay.
And our last board meeting is on, I believe, June 11th, and the next one is August 13th after that.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Gretchen, did you want to say something?
I just wanted to augment what my colleague has shared with you all with the fact that the Turnpike Authority is actually constructing the project. The state is bringing a substantial amount of money to the project. As Larry mentioned, we're not certain the exact figure yet, but we have been told they've made presentations in front of our board, and they've been very clear that they are running out of time as far as being able to determine, they have to get this project moving. It's already behind schedule in their work plan. And so we're here today to ask for a not to exceed amount from county contingency money that was in the financial plan. This was not a project that was contemplated as part of the original Surtax financial plan, and therefore this is the first new project that would be added to the Surtax plan, to the Mobility Advancement Program. I just wanted to make sure all of those things were on the record.
Doug, and then George.
A couple of comments. One, you've kind of answered part of it. This is coming out of the county's end of the fund, I presume. Not a city, but a county expenditure. And it's the most we're going to, this is actually growing our money if everything goes well. You're doing a $50 million project for $25 million of our funds, correct?
That's correct. It's
Which is the
actually
whole goal of-
$56 million plus we estimate another $5 million for the acquisition of right-of-way, so you're up.
Which
over
is
60
one of
million.
the things we need to keep a checklist on every project that comes here. This is what is our funds, and we've grown it to this, so in the end, we're gonna hopefully spend more than the Surtax dollars. On pages, I also, when I got my email about this, I guess I need to apologize. I answered Gretchen with a question, and then I ended up copying our chair on it because it's a natural habit, and apparently that. Well, Alan, I'm not supposed to do that. I said, well, I only did it to one person, but apparently I'm allowed to respond to Gretchen, but I cannot copy any of the board members. Sorry about that. Didn't know, and I'm sure no one else knew. So, you knew that? Yeah. All right, I should have copied you, and you'd have told me. Anyway, I apologize for that. But the question I was raising has to do with the fact on resiliency and sea level rise, et cetera, et cetera. And Gretchen told me the good news is that is a requirement. We heard about it last month from Mr. Stewart. And all these projects that we're going to be approving money for must address resiliency, because if we don't address it, every chance we get, we're going to be really underwater. So I'm glad to hear that that's going to be part of the criteria, because basically where's that water gonna go? Because if it doesn't go, and if it goes back to the ocean, how does it get there? Because sooner or later, we're not gonna have any way to pump it back there. So, I guess I apologize for doing something I shouldn't have, slapped my hand, and I'm glad to see that we're growing our dollars. It's kinda, how does this project, though, meet, it's already been approved that it meets these criteria we're supposed to approve, or is it, because it came at the last minute, I don't know how to address that.
What do you mean, you're gonna do all of it?
So your role, again, is to approve the proposed expenditure as consistent with the statute, just as you did with the former, and I believe you were at subsection 4 of 212055. And so what we're asking of you today is very similar to what you did last month when you approved the overall fiscal year 19 budget. This would be an amendment, basically, to that budget request. You would have to find it eligible under the statute. You would have to approve the proposed not to exceed expenditure of $4.5 million. And our board believes that this is an important project. The Turnpike Authority did not feel that a full interchange is warranted, hence the reason why we are being requested to participate in the funding. So they had, and I believe that's in the memo, they had proposed doing a partial interchange, and it was the determination of our board, and I believe also the City of Sunrise, that it was very important to do a full interchange, and so we have a financial participation requirement as a result of that.
This may sound strange, but this is in the City of Sunrise, and I assume they've wanted this for a long time, correct?
I can answer that. Yes, they
Pardon?
have. They
Well,
very
I
much, and
guess
their
this
community
would
has.
be, was this in the City of Sunrise requested projects?
Strangely, no. We
That,
talked about it during the actual development of the Surtax.
well, I understand that the cities are only gonna get $2.8 billion and the rest is county but being spent in the city. It just seems a little odd, something this important was not at least in the City of Sunrise. And I think we have an obligation to all people in all cities. This is one to me that they should be willing to come up to the table. Maybe we can, it's too late, but I would hate to see a city coming in here asking for something that they've been wanting for years and not even putting it on their list of traffic improvements. To me, that's not fair to everybody else. I just want to go on the record. Thank you.
Is there anybody else want?
Yes.
George?
So I'll be honest with you, I'm struggling with this request a little bit. It's not, as you indicated, not on the spreadsheet through 2023. As I understand it, we are being brought projects that have gone through the Broward MPO prioritization. I mean, the projects or the operating capital costs, the projects that have been submitted have gone through some prioritization process. Is that correct?
The plan that you have before you and the budget that we brought to you for FY19 was the county's budget. There were no city projects in the budget that you approved because the MPO has to prioritize municipal projects. The county brought forth their own plan, and the Board of County Commissioners voted on that plan. So it has been approved by the County Commission, but it has not gone through any prioritization process with the MPO.
Okay, then I guess maybe going off Mr. Coleman's comment, was this a project that the City of Sunrise brought to the Broward MPO for prioritization?
Mr. Allen?
I'm a little bit concerned with the process here because as I read the ordinance, it says the county commission will approve the project and submit it to us for approval and confirmation that it meets the statutes. We're being asked to approve it today, subject to further action by the Board of County Commissioners to approve the agreement with the Turnpike Enterprise as well as potentially the City of Sunrise for joint sharing of the cost. And places this board in a position here that I don't want us to be setting the priorities that are rightfully set by the Board of County Commissioners and the City of Sunrise. That's not our role to set those priorities. We are to assure compliance and ensure that it meets the statute requirements.
Go ahead.
Mr. Allen, we understand the concern, and I know Bertha shares your concern. This was not optimal, and it is not something over which we had a lot of control, since the Turnpike Authority actually has to prepare the local funding agreement. We expected to have the local funding agreement before this meeting, and for it to have been acted on by the board. I will say the board has had discussions about this. They have directed that Surtax funds be requested for this project. They support the full interchange. And, you know, that's on the record. There have been at least 2 discussions with our board about this project.
And I think I read the minutes for the last meeting that they did, but they directed the continued negotiations to proceed between the Turnpike Authority as well as an agreement with City of Sunrise. That has not happened yet. And I don't want, if we were to by chance to vote approve, say it meets the statutes, that's all it does from this board's perspective. The determination as to whether the city and the county can come to an agreement is outside our authority to be imposed here.
Ms. Bennett.
I am also uncomfortable with how this is unfolding. The optics is not good for me. I don't think it sets a good precedent for this board that we would go ahead and approve something without having any information other than what's here. We have no idea about how this project is truly being funded in terms of, you said there's a certain amount, but we don't know. Whatever the estimated amount is, we should know. So whatever presentation was made to the county commissioners that gave them confidence in approving it on some level should be shared with us so we can be more informed.
If I may answer, our intent was to have an agreement with the Florida Turnpike Enterprise by now and move forward. There has been some last-minute negotiations that we've been told from the state that they're willing to help fund more of this project. Because of that, there's been delays beyond our control that we can't get the information to you that you would normally have in front of you today. But the deadline for the start of this project hasn't changed. They gave us 2 weeks more as an additional time to get this done. And the problem is, for not only you, but for the county's commissioners to vote on by June the 11th, we have to have a document in place. And our concern is we also have to fund it within 30 days after that, begin the funding. So we're all sort of working behind something that is controlled by the state right now. But there was also the same deadline that we have for construction to start, or the design to start, excuse me. So we're sort of in a position that we feel uncomfortable, and we apologize for coming to you without the full information. But for us to move this project forward, we're told that if it doesn't go by the deadline, there will be no full interchange at Pat Salerno.
Doug.
Trying to see if there's any way to come up with a compromise. The most the surtax money should cover is 50% of this, at the absolute most, which means it's got to come from somewhere else. Number 2, I think some of it's got to come out of the city's budget that they didn't put in there and ought to be slapped on the hands that they didn't have it in there. And if they don't agree to come up with some of this coming out of some of their $2.8 billion, then I wouldn't even vote for this thing today. I mean, I understand, but I don't know what we can do about that, because Sunrise is obviously not here. Maybe we should call them on the phone.
Sunrise is planning to make a request for some money. The final amount I don't know. Originally, they were asking for $2 million for their portion, which would come out of Surtax, but they'd come back and ask for you.
They have, as I understand it, Sunrise has a budget. If if it wasn't in their program, their budget isn't going to change. Their $2 million has to come out of some of their other projects.
Yes.
I think we need a commitment from Sunrise that they're going to put up they're going to take some that out of their program and put some money here, because that's the only way I see us going ahead. We'll be here for a few more hours if you want to call them.
So may I just remind the group that the purpose of this request is simply to ensure that the expenditure is eligible under the statute, and I know that's where your debate is, that the amount being requested is acceptable. And if no agreement is reached, and our board does not act on June 11th on an agreement, and we don't meet the June 14th deadline, the money won't be expended. I wanted to give you all comfort that this is if all of these other dominoes fall into place, then up to $4.5 million could be expended before the end of this fiscal year on September 30th. But it in no way requires us to move forward with this project if the agreements aren't reached.
The only comment I have about that, we also have an obligation to all the residents and all the money. In this case, Sunrise is taking funds from somebody else that they should have allocated. That's my problem with it. So how do we get around that? I don't know.
My issue, I have an issue with just the process, and this isn't the way we were charged to do the business of the taxes, and it's if you're going to come late, then there should be more backup. It talks about what the scope of work is, but it doesn't go into the benefits that it's going to give us in mobility, and I'm quite sure it does all those things. The fact that the county hasn't voted on it yet certainly takes us outside of the process that we're supposed to be taking, and honestly, I don't really want to see any more projects come to us that are like last-second deals here. I don't. I know that you guys knew that you were going down a road a month ago. You knew you were going down a road 6 months ago. And so we probably should have at least been updated on this project if you were anticipating coming to us for money. And then, honestly, I think we should probably have a 30-minute meeting on June 12th, okay? And then you need to bring a lot more information than what we got here. I want to see how the costs break down. We need to have a checklist of things, information we need in order to approve a project, and one of them has to be describe to us how this is going to benefit mobility in Broward County. And not, oh, we're giving you an overpass and we're doing that. We intend to move 17,000 more cars through here more efficiently than we ever have before because of the construction of a new Pat Salerno Drive bridge over the Sawgrass Expressway. I want to understand, because you're asking people that aren't typically in the transit business to make decisions, but we're getting like very brown box information. And so, honestly, I'm going to vote no, unless we have a meeting on the 12th or 13th before the 14th deadline. And if you want to adjust that, then just ask the state, say, look, we probably will get there, but you need to move this thing to when they have their June meeting. And let the county approve it on June 11th, and let us do our business on whatever date we meet again in June, which is June something. And ask the state to extend it. And if they won't extend it, I think this board will take the time. I'm out of town, but I'll call in, okay, and listen, and vote on it between those two dates. That's my take on it. So that we do it in the correct process, and so that the optics are appropriate, right?
Yes, we need to operate within the integrity of our charge on behalf of the taxpayers.
And will we also have more information about any commitments from Sunrise or not by that deadline?
I don't think that's a bad thing.
We have been told that Sunrise is going to discuss it at their meeting on the 28th of this month and what they might do or might not do.
Well, I suggest you come back to them and tell them why we're tabling
I'll
it.
be glad to.
And
Go ahead.
I think it's a good idea that we are noticed on that meeting so we can be at least present to hear some of the discussion they're having at their Sunrise meeting. So we can, you know, be a little bit more informed.
Are you guys okay with this recommendation I made with maybe a 30-minute meeting or something in June, or is that? And again, I'm going to be out of the. Is that possible? I won't be here either, but I can call in.
You need a quorum. You'll need a quorum of the other
I'll
members.
be here.
I'm not comfortable with just a call-in with limited information to talk about this, but I did have a question.
Go ahead.
In reading the wording in the document, it says Broward County is requesting the board, Oversight Board, consider funding approval for the first payment to the Florida Turnpike Enterprise in amount of $4.5 million. So I'm not clear when you say first payment. What does that?
The first payment is for the design and the engineering of the project for the Florida Turnpike Enterprise who will be doing that
So
work.
there's more payments expected from Surtax, not
Yes.
just,
We said it's $25 million up front for the Surtax. And we're hopefully by that time we'll have sometime worked out how all our agreements with the city will be, who will fund what portion and how much the county will fund.
so the not to exceed is in reference to what?
It is just the first payment for the design and construction of this interchange.
So those terms are a little confusing to me. Not to exceed, first payment, process. I think as we've all said, it's just a little disjointed, probably is the best word. And so for that reason and the amount of money, and city projects are also part of this deal, and at what point do all cities and their projects, and how does this then relate to the Sunrise project? And then what money I know it's surtax, but is this more, where's this money coming from? So is that like there's a fund balance sitting there, and therefore this is where this money would be derived from? So I'm a little unclear even with that. And for that reason also, I would not be in support of this today in terms of voting for it.
Doug, do you have something to say? I thought you were about to say.
To answer part of the question, I asked repeatedly to the states if they could give us some, how much money will be spent for each portion. At this point, they refuse to do so because they're getting information from this, up at the state themselves how this will be done, and they don't have that answer, and just don't want to put anything out right now. I apologize again that
I don't
prefer to have
understand
that
how
number.
the state is lacking in clarity, but then they're going to give us a deadline of June 14th.
I think what's missing so this is a Turnpike Enterprise project, and it's to expand the Sawgrass, and they were going to add limited interchange, and they have a project schedule that they've been following, and they're trying to stay on schedule. And the full interchange was requested by the city of Sunrise, and I think the county commissions, at least some of our commissioners, have expressed an interest in supporting having the full interchange. And without the commitment, the local commitment, the project's going to move forward without the interchange. So we're dealing with the Turnpike Enterprises project that the local governments want to enhance, and the enterprise, the Turnpike Enterprise has expressed a willingness to fund 50% of the additional improvements that the local governments want, but they want the project to stay on schedule. And I don't know if that adds some kind of context to the conversation.
Ms. Bennett?
I mean, I can appreciate the value that this opportunity brings. I mean, it's matching funds or even probably exceeding what we're contributing. It's just the whole idea of this unknown. It's making a decision without understanding what you're making the decision about. So I would not support at this point.
Okay, Mr. Allen and then Mr. Coolman.
I think we need to recognize that the Turnpike Authority, or the enterprise, Turnpike Enterprise, considers themselves a business, and when they do their projections of needs, it's not so much the traffic needs, it's how much revenue that will produce to the Turnpike to cover the cost of capital improvements. So, I mean, you need to consider that. Now, certainly they have never been stuck on 595 at 5:30, 6 o'clock at night trying to get onto the Sawgrass with traffic back way past 595 down 75 down towards Miami. Certainly there is a traffic need there, a demand for more interchange, expanded Sawgrass. Keep in mind also that the Turnpike Authority for 30 years ago said they didn't want to make the investment in the Sawgrass because there was nothing out there. And I think there's some of those people still around today. But let me just try to structure something here. I'm hearing some hesitancies and about a potential meeting. Motion would be to defer this matter until June, whatever, 12th, or whatever we can come up with a meeting date, subject to the county and city and the Turnpike having an approval process back to us by that date, when we would then consider whether it meets the requirements of the statute. That would be a motion.
Is that a motion? Let's see if we can get a second.
I'll second it for discussion.
Okay.
But I want to,
There you
since
go.
I have the mic, my compromise is, I think the county commission is asking us to do something they shouldn't be. I love the project. I think we're going to put the money there someday. I think in this case, the county has to put their $4.5 million up so we can get the ball rolling, and we'll come back and reimburse them when we have all these answers, or we do this. But I don't think it's going to come, I don't think the county should put us in this position. And if it's only $4.5 million, take it out of somewhere else. They just can't have it out of our funds.
Out of their contingency fund. But
Yes, Ms. Bennett.
Alan, I think we should kind of go back to Alan's suggestion a little bit. I know Ms. Love is a little unsure about it, but I think just to give the project an opportunity to survive with some of our dollars, I think it's a good idea for us to come back on the 14th or whatever date you suggested to have a meeting. And, it could be by Skype so we're able to see, make sure it's your comments and it's not, somebody else, so we know that you're actually there. But I think it's not a bad idea for us to at least meet halfway to provide some oversight on whatever is provided.
Ms. Love.
Just for clarity, I'm not opposed to the concept of what's being requested here. This was more about the process. So I want to make sure that that's clear.
Okay.
And so it's not the concept of, or the whole request itself. I just had concerns about where we are in this process to approve the funds. Because I thought you said the county commission has not weighed in on this yet. They had general discussions, but did not have the information, full information, the agreement, and to be able to say, yes, we do agree with this. Is that correct?
The county commission has not acted on a local funding agreement because we don't have the specifics yet, yes.
Okay.
So what is another possible option for you all to consider is that Mr. Mahoney can reach out to the City of Sunrise and the Turnpike Authority and ask for an additional extension based on the fact that we still don't have an LFA. And you all could add an action item to your board retreat and budget workshop. And what we could do is provide you with a presentation about the project. We would seemingly have very specific information about the funding breakdown. We would be able to bring you information about whether or not the City of Sunrise had taken action to participate financially in the project. And at the end of that meeting, or at the end of that presentation, you all could have an action item to consider this again. And what I can also do is just provide you all with an email update when I send you the email with the information about the City of Sunrise meeting agenda timing for the 28th. I can let you know also whether or not the Turnpike Authority is amenable to extending to the end of June.
So I think it would, we still got a motion on the table. I think we could amend that. I don't think I can do it as the chair, but I think we could amend that to say that to keep the date, the earlier meeting in motion, and if there is an extension to the deadline, to move that meeting to our workshop. Do you want to make an amendment, Doug or Phil?
Yeah, I was going to say we need to defer this action today, defer to a meeting to be scheduled prior to June 14th. However, if agreement is not reached at that point in time between the county, the city, and the Turnpike Authority relative to a potential resolution of the matter before our June 28th meeting. Does that make sense?
That's good enough.
So, I mean, basically, we always have the option of creating an emergency meeting. In other words, the motion could be just to defer until June 28th, but then to allow staff to go back to the Turnpike Authority and see whether that can be delayed until then. And if not, then at that point in time, call a emergency meeting.
I would suggest if we could take to the 27th, because right now we still don't have a date firm from the Turnpike Enterprise. They said they would work with us if they push us back so far, but I don't know when, they don't have an idea when they're going to get the information right now from the state.
I'll accept the amendment.
Okay, all right, so we have a second on the amendment. I just want to say one more thing. You know, I'm not big on the whole city battle over money thing, okay, because I think we're going to be doing projects all over the county that are going to land in every single city in Broward County. And we can't get involved in worrying about cities. But I do agree that if a city brings something to the county that they would like to be included in the surtax funding, which it sounds to me like Sunrise came to the county and said, hey, we'd like to expand the Turnpike interchange, make it more prolific, then I think it is that comment you made, Doug, does make sense. And then I would say that maybe they should include that in one of their priorities. And, oh, by the way, you got to jump in front of every other city in the county with that project. So, but there's going to be projects that a county's going to bring forward where they want to do work, and obviously it's going to be all over the place. So I agree with you, Doug, on that point. And someone may want to get that information over to City of Sunrise as well. So with that, if there's no more comments, let's vote on the motion. All those in favor? Aye.
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 Those opposed? Okay. Okay.
I'm okay with it.
You're an
I
aye?
didn't say aye.
Okay, great. All right, that's great, thanks. Let's move on to the next item. So we'll go back over to, just quickly, if we want to give some information on the June retreat agenda. Gretchen, would you like to do that? Thank you.
Absolutely. So subject to the a motion just made, the action just taken, we may have a presentation on the Pat Salerno full interchange, okay? I've heard that from members today, just let me know if I've got your direction correct, that you'd like to have some discussion at the retreat about job opportunities both in county and in the trades, what we're doing to improve small business outreach and capacity building in our community around the types of opportunities that will occur. We'll be providing you with a financial forecast, obviously. That's kind of the purpose of the budget workshop, to talk through what we plan to see in FY20. And if we have any information at that time with respect to funding leverage that we could report to you so far, or any type of performance updates, impact so far, we'll be happy to bring that to you, because at that point we will, I think Tim mentioned mid-July will be the first 10% service improvement. We won't have actually taken our first service level increase to the streets, but we may have some information at that point that we can share with you about intended impacts.
Could you also bring with us our meeting schedule for the balance of the year through September?
Certainly. So what I have so far is that you all will be meeting in July, again, the fourth Thursday of July, and the meeting for the retreat, I will be sending something formally out, but I just wanted to mention to you all, we did find a location that has strong Wi-Fi and will meet all of our needs, that is free to the county, which is Treetops Park, if that's something that you all are amenable to.
Mm-hmm.
Treetops Park is in Plantation. Is that okay with everyone? I'm sorry, in Davie.
In
That's right,
Davie.
Davie.
And what date is it?
It's on June 27th.
What day of the week is that?
That's a Thursday, always the
It's our
fourth
typical-
Thursday. It's your
our
typical meeting date.
Meeting date.
Okay.
So the next meeting's at Treetops Park, and it's a workshop.
And
One other questions about our meetings. Does anyone have any objection to moving our meeting to 9:30 as opposed to 9? Simply because I have to leave another meeting early, and the traffic is actually better at 9:30 than 9. Is anybody?
I'm fine with that.
Are you
I'm
okay?
fine with that.
You're killing me, okay? All right? Because now you've just taken half my morning, and now I'm sitting around waiting for Doug to get done with his
Can
meeting.
come to
But
my
that's
7:30, okay.
That's okay. We'll do it at 9:30. He and I have known each other, so don't think I'm just being mean to him. I have a few things. So is that going to start in June? Are we going to do 9:30 this June?
That's what I heard.
Is that where we're going to go?
This June doesn't matter, because I'm probably gonna have to miss, 9:30 would be,
Yeah.
I can get to my other one. That's great.
We're trying to help you here. Okay. All right. So I have a few items that I'd like to discuss, or that we can kind of.
You're talking about meetings. How did we leave the other item relative to the Sawgrass? Did we say that you call emergency meeting if they can't
Either or.
either or?
Well, the way you did
Right.
we voted for yes.
Well, you realize I'm dealing with, 72 years old, and I have this memory problem.
Oh, I didn't think you did. Okay.
So it's going to be for the 27th.
I just wanted to confirm
Yeah.
that we understood.
Right, so right now, we're planning to have the presentation related to this particular project at the next scheduled meeting, which is June 27th. In the event that the board needs to meet prior to then we would follow the emergency meeting notification requirements that are outlined in the procedures.
No worries.
However, I want, everyone needs to note that a quorum is required, and a quorum requires at least a majority of the members to be physically present in order to conduct a business. So this is a 9-member board, and we'd have to have at least 5 members physically present, and then other members can participate by phone in order to conduct business. So in the event of an emergency meeting, we just need to keep that in mind.
And what is the potential date for the emergency meeting?
The week of June 11th is what has been discussed, sometime after June 11th, because the county commission,
And
right,
before June 14th.
after June 12th, which is when June 11th, when the county commission will meet, but before June 14th, which is the current deadline for the Turnpike Enterprise. In the event that the Turnpike Enterprise extends the date, then the emergency meeting wouldn't be necessary.
Okay.
Okay, so the things
Chair, I'm sorry, could we take a poll as to who could commit to being physically present at a meeting during those 2 days?
Sure. Ms. Love?
So are we talking the possible dates of the 12th, 13th, and 14th?
12th and 13th.
I thought 12th and...
Okay, so the
Yeah.
12th and the 13th.
Mm-hmm. Would you be available potentially?
To physically be here?
Yes.
Yes.
How about you, Doug?
I'll make myself.
Great. Ms. Bennett?
I think I'll be good.
Okay, Mr. Allen. So we got 4. George?
All right, I guess it's just me then. I cannot.
It's me too. I can't
Okay.
be there physically. Ms. Kelly?
I think so, but I was making plans to go away sometime in June
And
to see kids, and I don't know yet.
And Shay Smith may be back.
Right.
And Cynthia Chambers.
Could we ask staff to poll particularly the members that aren't here today? Just to make sure we have.
See which of the 2 dates are the best, so we
Yeah,
get
yeah.
over 5. In fact, you might want to poll us all with an email, since we're a bunch of maybes.
Okay. All right, can we, so we were talking about the retreat, and there were a few things that I did have on my list of things that maybe, if you haven't already covered them, maybe you have. I think we should, as a group, just discuss marketing and branding for, at all levels, moving forward. I would also like to, as a group, talk about what we expect when we analyze a project. We should develop a checklist of information that we need to have so that it's not very vague for staff to show up and give us a presentation. Budget could include, and this is for discussion at the retreat, I'm just making performance, how it's going to improve performance, blah, 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 blah. So let's, I'd like to discuss that. And then also, I would like to discuss a way where we could possibly be kept in the loop on what's on deck. Like, what are some of the projects that are starting to bubble up? And that could be maybe on a quarterly basis or every 6 months from staff. If they knew there was stuff coming, it's still in the conceptual preliminary stages, but these are where we're going in the near future, so that we can at least understand what's coming down the road. And maybe we would have known about Pat Salerno coming down the road.
Related to that, what's the status of the MPO prioritizing all the city projects? Because that would be nice to know.
So the interlocal agreement that we entered into with the Metropolitan Planning Organization in April, that you all then provided the funding for, provides the deadlines for the deliverables with respect to prioritization. The first is right now, February of 2020. We are working to amend that agreement to move to March because there was some delay in our negotiations, and they do need time to stand up their program and hire staff. So they are required to provide municipal project prioritization for fiscal year 2020 funds early 2020, so that it can be included in the county's budget process for 2020, and those funds can be distributed to the cities, the participating cities. Then the next deliverable is actually July of 2020, which is when the MPO and the county have agreed that we are going to be bringing to you a 5-year plan of projects. And the way that we are going to be doing that, based on direction from the board at our last meeting, is creating a very interactive, robust map that shows all of the projects based on whether or not they were included in the initial plan, Surtax plan, which the vast, vast majority of them should be, and give you specific details about those projects, be able to hover over them, show you what they're intended to do, where they're happening, what city they're in, whether it's a city project or a county project, and probably do a workshop similar to what we're going to do this June when we do that, because it will be a lot of information. It will take some time, and we want you all to be able to answer a lot of questions. After that, so after July of 2020, the next milestone is February of 2021. And in February of 2021, under our interlocal agreement with the MPO, that would be the first time that the MPO would be entertaining new city projects. And that would be the first cycle that municipalities could submit new projects that are not currently contained in the plan. Because right now, what the MPO is really working on is taking those 500 plus projects that municipalities submitted and prioritizing them, the ones that are in the plan. Does that answer your question?
Yes.
And just
Go ahead.
piggyback on that, are they going to be working with the Office of Economic Development to figure out that 30% piece?
Well, actually, that's really more what Ms. Wallace and I will be working on, because the requirement of that 30% goal, and by the way, I've been doing presentations to the municipalities pretty much every single day, and yesterday I did one at the MPO to a large room full of municipal representatives, and make sure that they understand that there is this 30% local participation requirement on this program. Mm-hmm. And so that's going to be in the interlocal agreements that we have with the municipalities. It really won't be something that the MPO is dealing with. They're going to be looking at the projects from a, is it improving connectivity? Is it relieving congestion? That's going, and obviously that equity overlay is going to come into play. But those are going to be their primary foci, and then we are going to have to make sure that our interlocal agreements with them, in order for them to access the dollars, say you have to do all of these other things in order to receive money.
I'm interested in attending some of those, if you don't mind.
Okay, so we talked about the retreat. Is there any other ideas or things that anyone would like to, any topics you'd like to bring forward at the retreat? Yes, sir.
Two potential areas that may look at is, I don't think we'll be in a position at this point in time to get a presentation from your performance consultant to sort of highlight or think about terms of what are different measures of performance and what would be the process. It's probably too early to think about that for June 27th. I heard a lot of discussion, relative to the county brain. Is there some futurist out there that we might bring in, perhaps from MIT or someplace else, to give us a vision of what the transportation network of the next 20 years or whatever is going to look like?
Wow. That's cool. And I would say that in addition to, wanting to have the folks come to speak to us about how they're going to measure performance, we should have ideas as to how we measure performance. I mean, there's some stuff out there that just ridership, getting people out of cars. I mean, it's just very basic stuff that what we're trying to achieve here. How you get there is the complex part of it. But when we start measuring things, it should be: are you moving traffic faster? Are you getting people out of cars? Are you providing new programs that are giving people additional options and alternatives when it comes to traveling through the county? All those things, those are our objectives. Those are the things that we should be measuring projects against. And maybe we should develop a list of our own And then when the performance consultants come, they'll add to our list and they'll maybe open our eyes a little bit better. But I don't think we should ever, ignore the fact that that it's the people that are going to drive and we're just laymen that can bring a separate perspective that people that are in transit all the time don't really get. So, yes, Ms. Pennant.
I endorse everything you just said.
Okay.
Well, I think it's important because the culture here is very different. If you look at cities like New York, they're so accustomed to taking public transportation. And we here in Florida, we're not. And so we want to see how are we able to shift cultures.
That's right.
In terms of, the willingness to even use transportation. We could build this fabulous transportation system and nobody's using it.
That's right. Okay, anything else? All right.
Allison.
Yes, Ms.
Just
Love.
want to check, I know it says budget workshop here, so that is a component. I know we have a lot of other subjects. Do you know how long that segment will be and who's doing it and what it's going to be comprised of?
No, I don't, as the short answer. It is likely going to be in 3 segments, similar to what we did previously, where you would see forecasts, and then the transit, the public works, and the administrative innovation components. There will likely be a new element of municipal forecasting with respect to community shuttle. So the community shuttle program is going to start being funded October 1st. So that'll be the first city-related funding that starts to flow before the MPO does their prioritization recommendations. So that you will have a new component that will be community shuttle and municipal forecasts. It can be, what I will try to do is let you all know what the agenda is starting to look like based on the feedback that I got today.
Okay.
Is there a preference from the group about doing the budget workshop first and then the presentations? Would you rather have the presentations first?
I prefer the budget workshop first.
Okay.
I do too. I'd rather have, front load the, with substantive discussion rather than presentations.
I agree.
We got a good idea of
Is the county commission having a separate workshop on MAP?
It will be part of a larger budget workshop later in the summer. Yeah, it'll be one of the ones that comes near the end because they want you to have yours first.
It might be useful if that's going to be a component of another workshop, that the board members here be aware of that workshop.
You would be invited to attend that
Okay.
workshop, absolutely.
Alan.
yes.
Is it a workshop or a retreat? I'm trying to figure out whether or not the public will be invited.
The public is always invited
Okay.
to everything that you all are doing. It will be live webcast and it will be transcribed, just like this meeting. And the budget workshop it will open your meeting, and then we'll take a break and we'll move into the retreat component. And I'll see if I can get somebody from MIT to come in, a
That'd be
futurist, and then we'll go through the various presentations. We'll have individuals that are working on the various facets of implementation come and do these presentations for you.
That's great. Thank you. Did we want to talk about budget process for 2020? Is that another item, or did we already talk about it?
I think I covered it unless you
Okay.
all have any specific questions.
No? Okay, so other business, says here, chair's report. I do have something to add. I think this board is great. I think the people on this board are great. I think we bring a different perspective, and everyone's engaged, and we're starting to get our legs underneath us. We're starting to understand the process, and I think I'm honored to be on a board with you guys, so I'm happy where we're going. Thank you. All right, your report.
Mr. Chair. Oh,
And
okay.
did you want to say something? I'm sorry.
Well, I just want to thank you for your leadership and also for Gretchen and Angela. I know there's a lot of work that goes into creating these meetings and getting all our pamphlets and booklets ready, and so I just wanted to publicly thank you.
Oh, one other thing. Lenny, is that his name? Yes. That guy's a rock star, man. I'm gonna tell you, the stuff he does, it's awesome. And the fact that the county has a department that's looking at those things, and it's gonna be awesome. So, and I'm looking forward to MIT as well. You want?
There's nothing to report at this time.
Okay, and with that, we will adjourn our meeting. There is a tour of the traffic management facility scheduled today, so if anybody wants to take a tour, thank you, and we'll see each other in June.